Thanks, Rick. Really appreciate that. Thanks, Tony, as well. Thank you all also for joining us. This is a Township Council regular meeting for October 19th, 2021. This is a regular meeting of the Council of the Township of Montclair and is being broadcast live on Channel 34 and is streaming live on the Montclair TV 34 YouTube channel. It's available on demand and can will be rebroadcast. This meeting is called pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act. This meeting was included in the revised annual notice of the meeting schedule as set forth in Resolution R-21-165 adopted by the Council at its conference meeting of August 11, 2021. Advertised in the official newspaper on August 19th, posted in the bulletin board outside of the municipal building has remained continuously posted. In addition, a copy of the annual notice has been available to the public. It is on file with the town clerk's office. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Roll call, please.
Counselor Cummings,
Present.
Deputy Mayor Hurlock,
Present.
Counselor Price Abrams,
Present.
Counselor Russo,
Present.
Counselor Schlager,
Here.
Counselor Yacobelis,
Present.
Mayor Spiller.
Present. Thank you very much. All right, we'll move forward with the agenda with flexibility. And with that, I'd like to move in an effort to minimize exposure to COVID-19 and to maintain social distancing practices of this meeting, the council, and further meetings until the pandemic is over will only be available to the public remotely. Those who wish to participate now during public comment should dial into 408-418-9388. When asked to enter an access code, please enter 2349-303-7979 and press pound. When asked to enter an attendee number, please simply press pound. When asked to state your name, do so and press pound. The administrator will then say when it's the caller's turn to speak, and the caller will hear 2 beeps. At that time, the caller will have an opportunity to make his or her comments. Mr. Stafford, Mr. Fan, turn it over to you, please.
Thank you, sir. First would be caller with the number starting 973-820, 973-820, please. For the record, state your name. Do your best to keep your comments under 3 minutes and mute your listening device.
Good evening. It's Tony Martin from the Tenants Organization of Montclair. I moved to call in tonight to tell you, number one, I love how the notice of the extension of the freeze on rent increases is displayed very prominently on your website. The issue is we still have people who don't know. And I continue to get calls and letters, and so does Ahava Felicidad, our tenants organization president, from people who are worried because their rent has been increased. Secondly, I moved to call because today was really chilly, and in my building, we were struggling with trying to get the heat working in all the apartments. We needed to reach out to our landlord, and we've been without a superintendent for a time. We had to reach out and get a temporary superintendent who was licensed to turn on the boiler. My point being, we really need to have a beefed up housing staff and tenant protection at Town Hall. I grow weary of listening to the property owners talk about their civil rights being violated because a rent control ordinance has been passed and may be implemented. We're talking about people's right to live comfortably and at a reasonable price. I thank you so much for all of your efforts. I urge you to stay strong in the fight because the needs continue to be there and even to grow and increase. Thanks again. Good night.
Thank you. Next would be caller with the number starting 973-619, 973-619. It is your turn to comment. Please, for the record, state your name. Keep your comments under 3 minutes and mute your listening device.
Good evening. Can you hear me well?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. Good evening to all of the Township Council, Mayor and Council, and all the public, everyone listening, whether you're on live or live watching on YouTube. It is a wonderful Tuesday night here in Montclair. Yes, I agree, a little bit chilly. And I just want to, even though I prepared something else I want to say, I want to make note or make more light of messages that we have been receiving on our Facebook page, which we do also respond to, and we get everyone to also call in and send us email about the heat not being turned on in a timely fashion or done in a way that it should be done. And we'd have had to provide resources of handymen to assist tenants where there may not be a super. We want to make it clear that everyone does know and understand their rights with regards to repairs being done. So please reach out to us. You can be given information on who you can reach out to when something needs to be done and there is not a super and you're not getting a response from your landlord. The basic on that, and you still should call us for more info in a meeting, would be to hire a handyman or another professional who does that type of work that's needed. And that person is paid from what would be your rent. Now, we started stocking the little pantries as we spoke about, or as I spoke about on the last council call. So anyone going by the little pantries, there are 7 to count in Montclair. They're listed on the mutual aid website. We started stocking the pantries with a project that we've begun called Tea from Tomb, a variety or assortments of teas, and also updates on our rent freeze ordinance. And you'll see more information about meetings and joining us and getting help and resources on flyers that will be included in these different cello bags or gift bags that have assortment of teas in them in the pantries. These will also be going out to homeowner supporters as well as, of course, tenants through your building leaders and volunteers. So please take every opportunity to reach out to us. Tenants Organization Montclair at gmail.com and 973-936-8848. And those calls, so that everything's efficient, they do translate directly to Gmail. We'll hear your voicemail through the Gmail, and it will also transcribe your text messages. Lastly, I'd like to remind everyone
Ms.
that—
Felici, that sound you just heard
yes.
was your time expiring, so please conclude your comments promptly.
I'd like to remind everyone that you are here in Montclair because you belong here. So we want to make sure that you are feeling welcome to come out to any and all events and meetings that we are hosting. Just reach out to us, and we want you to stay. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Next will be caller with the number starting 917-392. 917-392. It is your turn to comment. Please, for the record, state your name, mute your listening device, and keep your comments to 3 minutes. 917-392. Very well. Next would be caller with the number starting 609-751. It is your turn to comment. 609-751. Please state your name, keep your comments to 3 minutes, and mute your listening device.
Hi, my name is Lonnie Summer Padilla, and I live here in Montclair. I am calling in tonight regarding the bond that the district is requesting approval for the necessary upgrades to our school's HVAC system. The Montclair Local put out an article this afternoon that outlines the communication between the BOSE and the BOE regarding this issue. After reading this article, I was left with an overall sense of devastation that our children's safety has become a game of politics. I urge all stakeholders to do what is right and necessary for the sake of our children. I understand that the disrepair of our school buildings is a long-standing issue, but now is not the time to point fingers and to make this about politics. We are in the middle of a pandemic and lives are at stake. Now is the time to do what is right. Thank you.
Thank you. Next would be caller with the number starting 646-701. 646-701. It is your turn to comment. Please state your name for the record, mute your listening device, and keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Mary Packer, and I am the Executive Director of the Montclair Public Library Foundation, a nonprofit that supports programming and special projects of the library. I learned yesterday that the Montclair Public Library has not yet received the additional quarterly funding already approved by the Council for the third quarter of 2021, and that this is affecting the ability of the library to intelligently and effectively plan for hours and programming. Libraries in surrounding communities have invested more resources in their libraries throughout the pandemic in recognition that libraries provide essential services to their citizens. We have a large economic disparity in Montclair. The technology and entertainment resources that a lot of us take for granted in our homes are not available to many of our neighbors. In 2020, the number of active library card users doubled from the previous year. Nearly 90,000 electronic items were borrowed during that time. The need for library services increased at the very time that municipal funding was significantly reduced from that of prior years. West Orange, Maplewood, and Milburn are all investing in renovations or expansions of their library buildings. I would remind the Council that its 2021 funding for the library was less than 14% in excess of the required minimum, compared to 35% for Fairlawn, 36% for Hackensack and Livingston, and 50% for Maplewood. I believe these numbers show how much our neighboring towns value their public libraries. If municipal funding for the Montclair Public Library remains at the same level in 2022 as in 2021, there is a very real risk that the operating hours will be insufficient to meet New Jersey state requirements for aid. This decision would make the library ineligible for said aid and threaten the library's membership in the BCCLS, or Buckles Consortium of Libraries. Without Buckles, the materials and resources available to Montclair library cardholders will be significantly reduced. There are literally more than 5 million items currently available through the Buckles system that would no longer be available to Montclair residents. I urge the members of the Council in the strongest possible terms to use their position to ensure that payments to the library already approved by this body are no longer delayed by the Township, and that sufficient funds are allocated to the library in the 2022 budget to meet the needs of the Montclair community. Thank you.
Thank
Before
you.
you go on, Manager, can I just ask a question? We're going to be talking about this tonight. Is that true? That's the report on the library funding, or am I wrong? Does anybody hear me?
Yes, I could hear you. I didn't know that if you were posing that question to me. Yes, there will be a
Well-
presentation by our financial consultant, Mr. Benecke, as well as a representative of the auditors with respect to the Free Public Library. Yes.
So will that possibly address what this board, I think that's Mary's the chair of the Library Foundation, I believe. I met Mary when I did the reading of my book, which was about a dog. I did the reading in the big chair a couple of weeks ago, and I met Mary and talked to her about this. So I'm hopeful something, can be addressed when we have this discussion, because I know people call in like about heat. You got to have heat by the 15th of October, right? Am I right or wrong on that? Because people are calling in about they're getting cold now. See? So these are the things that mean something to people's lives, having enough heat, having a place to sleep. I'm just so annoyed that this country could actually fund all these things if we just taxed the people who are not paying their fair share. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Next would be the caller with the number starting 917392. 917392, please, for the record, state your name. Keep your comments to 3 minutes and mute your listening device.
Hi, my name is Eileen Birmingham. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Eileen Birmingham, and I'm a resident of Montclair for 7 years now. I'm very happy to live here, and I'm the daughter of a New York City police officer who was a volunteer fireman, and I feel compelled to say that because of all the places that I've ever lived, it feels the most taboo in Montclair to ask questions about the public safety sector and the budget that the outsized budget that we spend on public safety. Because when you do, so many people will say things like, "How dare you?" and accuse you of being disrespectful. Or after you ask the question, rather than answer your question, people will feel the need to make a statement about how wonderful the police or fire department is, as if you have insulted them by asking a question about their budget. But I'm going to ask questions because the public safety sector is the biggest budget driver in the municipal budget, accounting for half of available spending when you subtract out debt service in our town. And the public safety sector is frankly outsized compared to other similarly sized towns, especially towns like Montclair that are responsible for paying for most of their school budget through property taxes versus generous amounts of state aid, which Montclair no longer receives. And so the previous callers who asked questions about the school and the library, I think, are very relevant to why we need to look at the public safety sector. I have a question, for example, as to why Montclair, despite having a very large per capita police force, also pays very high rates of police overtime. Why is the police overtime budget consistently as high, usually higher, than the entire parks and recreation budget in our town? This is not common for most New Jersey towns. What is the data that justifies this expense? In Montclair, unlike other towns, we see very little data coming from our public safety sector. Another example, 10 years ago, the town manager of Bloomfield told the town that they could not afford the fire department as it was currently configured, and he reduced the force from 90 to 78 and consolidated it into 3 houses. Of course, there were objections to this then, but 10 years later, Bloomfield is budgeted for a force of 72 working out of 3 houses, and is an ISO Class 2 rated department. And their fire personnel are less than ours, even though they have a considerably larger population. Similarly, Maplewood and South Orange are in the process of merging their departments, and after several consultant reports and discussions with the Department of Community Affairs, the plan is to have 71 firefighters working out of 3 houses. So as a resident and taxpayer of Montclair, I am left to wonder why our full complement is close to 90 firefighters or more. What is the rationale for this? At the budget meeting this year, we were told that in 2020, Montclair firefighters responded to 1,668 incidents, with no further information about what or where these responses were. In comparison, I can read a report from West Orange that is full of statistics and quickly learn that their fire department, which is also an EMS service, responded to 6,514
That was your
incidents.
time expiring, so please conclude your comments promptly.
Okay, I will just conclude. I have a lot more data here, which I obviously don't have time to say. I would just say, please use the same amount of scrutiny to the public safety budget as you do when you look at our school budgets and our library budgets, because as I said, we have an outsized budget for public safety here in Montclair. Thank you.
Thank you. Next would be caller with the number starting 917510. 917570. It is your turn to comment. Please, for the record, state your name. Keep your comments to 3 minutes and mute your listening device.
Hello, this is Obi Miranda Woodley. I live in the 1st Ward. I'm speaking tonight because I am outraged that our children are being used as pawns in your political games. Our children were unable to attend school in person for 9 months because the staff did not feel safe returning to the schools. At every meeting, the MEA spoke about the terrible conditions of our schools and refused to return. Side note, where are they now? Mr. Spiller, did you put on your NJEA cap and order the MEA to stand down? They have not once spoken up about the desperately needed HVAC repairs. Our kids are finally in school. The temperatures is dropping. They are eating outdoors and sitting in classrooms with windows open. My kids are already complaining that it's cold in class, a kindergartner and a fourth grader. So not only are they at risk due to a highly contagious Delta variant, they will be distracted by the temperature in their classroom. Why on earth would Lori Price Abrams, David Cummings, and Bill Herlock ask the BOE to start the state approval process, knowing full well this is a time-sensitive matter? From what I understand, there is no legal reason why the DOSC bond authorization would need to wait on the NJDOE approval. You are, in essence, failing our children. I urge you to hold a meeting immediately to get this done. In the Montclair local article, Mr. Cummings referred questions about this matter to Bill Herlock. Why are our political leaders in this progressive, mostly Democrat town deferring to Bill Herlock, a known Republican? What is wrong with our leadership, and why are you so heartless? You may think that voters have a short memory, but trust me, we will remind our neighbors of this failure to protect our children and to fix our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next would be caller with the number starting 973-747. 973-747. It is your turn to comment. Please, for the record, state your name. Keep your comments to 3 minutes and mute your listening device.
Good evening. This is William Scott, the co-chair of the Montclair Housing Commission and the chair of the NAACP Housing Committee, and also a member of the Parks and Recreation Committee. Yesterday, I attended the Senior Citizen Advisory Committee meeting, and one of the agenda items that was reviewed was the recently extended rent freeze moratorium, and also there were questions about the Department of Community Affairs rental assistance program. And the seniors were wondering why they don't see any posting, at least on Channel 34, for rental assistance for landlords and tenants. And matter of fact, this is a question really for Mr. Stafford, because we should be able to advertise that information on a regular basis so tenants and landlords could find out where to go to get rental assistance in Trenton, dealing with the Department of Community Affairs. And as far as the recently passed rent freeze moratorium, that should be advertised on the main website of the township's webpage, because these are going to be ongoing resources that people need to understand and how to get additional information. So, Mr. Stafford, is it possible to get these postings up and running on Channel 34 or the township website?
Is that all you have to say, Mr. Scott, or did you want me to answer now, and are you through?
Yes, that's all I'd like to see if I can get an answer on that.
Very well, thank you. Yes, I will absolutely have it looked into to advertise with respect to the State Department of Community Affairs rental assistance program on TV 34. I believe that was in the works, candidly, with respect to, or on behalf of or on the part of our, communications director, but I will follow up with that tomorrow. And I thank you for that call and that suggestion.
Mrs. Stafford, Mayor, can I comment?
Please go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you. I want to speak up on something that's bothering me from the previous call. I don't think it's okay to call out anyone's political affiliation and hang it around and say that it's a negative thing. I think that's completely inappropriate and unfair. Deputy Mayor Herlock and I disagree on quite a lot, but I think that crossed the line and was inappropriate, and I would call it out if it was on my side of the aisle, and I just want to make sure to call it out now. That's all.
You, Councilor Yacobelis, and of course I feel the same way if it had been done to you or any of my colleagues. Totally inappropriate. I appreciate your comment. Thank you.
To Mr. Scott's second point, which I believe was his question with respect to whether the rent increase moratorium would be put on the township website. It is on the township website. It's on the homepage. And while at some point it might be pushed off the homepage because of other programs or events being advertised, it certainly was there, and it will continue to be there until further notice. Next would be the caller with the number starting 646-373. It is your turn to comment. 646-373. Please, for the record, state your name, keep your comments to 3 minutes, and mute your listening device. 646-373. All right. Moving on, next would be caller with the number starting 973-760. 973-760. It is your turn to comment. Please, for the record, state your name. Keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Hi,
And
can you hear
mute
me?
your listening device. Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Great. So my name's Jamie Duffy. I was sitting on the Board of Ed meeting last night, and obviously I had heard about the bond or the delay there, then read about it in the paper today. And obviously other people have questioned this. You know, I just think there's a lot of concern around it, and it would be really helpful if you can explain why the delay. Why does this need to get kicked back to the state? I think everyone understands that there's some much needed repairs to be done. So just to clarify for the community, I think it would be helpful if you shared that information. It'd be great to hear it tonight. And just so we know what to expect. Obviously, there's an election coming up, and that could have a huge impact on it. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next would be caller with the number starting 917-536. It is your turn to comment. 917-536. Please, for the record, state your name. Keep your comments to 3 minutes, and mute your listening device.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
This is June Regner. I live in Montclair. I have attended many Board of Ed meetings as well as many town council meetings. I would like to remind the people sitting on town council that several months ago, very quickly, there came up an issue whether you should purchase a piece of property. When I saw it on the agenda, I begged you not to vote on it immediately because I felt it was ridiculously and grossly overpriced. Every single one of you, yes, 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 voted it through with no questions and no comment. You can get things done quickly when you want to. For 10 years, fixing our schools, making major investments to our infrastructure has been in front of you. And many of you have been making those decisions badly for 10 years. You have put our children terribly at risk. And the only way you are being creative right now is to come up with ways to not do it, to run out the clock. It is terrible how you have zero concern for our children and for our schools and for their safety. You can do better. You should do better. You must do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, that is the last caller in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Stafford. I will officially close public comment, and then I'll see if Deputy Mayor has anything he'd like to add to any of those pieces. I will just say, I know that our other councilman, decided to note one of the pieces there, but certainly with the last caller, I think it's equally an example, and we do get them at times, to think that I know many council people on this screen right here have kids who are in the school system, went through the school system. I know that everybody in this community cares about our children. Certainly, hard to, I don't even know what to say to that, but talk about beyond the pale. I think everyone here obviously cares about our kids, everyone's kids. That's our absolute priority and focus. But so I'll just note that, but again, people again are free to make their comments as they call in. That said, Mr. Deputy Mayor, would you choose to say anything at this time?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would so choose. I don't think I've ever sat in a council meeting where so much disinformation has been disseminated so quickly, and it's really a disappointment and sad day for Montclair. Quick recitation of the facts here. I know the facts are always something that people don't want to hear, but just so that we're all on the same page, the Board of Education voted on the $60 million ask, if you will, on the bonds on August 13th. When we asked them what they had to support that so that we could see it as Board of School Estimate members, we were referred to a report that may have been issued sometime in June, 2 months earlier. I received on September 17th, a letter to meet as a Board of School Estimate over a month after the Board of Ed had voted on August 13th to have the $60 million ask. So that was September 17th. At that point, the Board of School Estimate was not fully comprised, as we had a member who stepped down. At the 21st Board Council meeting on September 21st, we voted immediately after we got the ask to have the meeting, over a month after the board voted for the bonds for 60 million to fill that spot. On the 23rd, I got back, once we had a full Board of School Estimate comprised, with the superintendent, who sent me the letter on the 17th to get dates to have that meeting, which we had on the 30th. At that meeting on the 30th, we asked for more information because the night before, on the 29th, we finally received the backup for the $60 million ask, which had a number of, I believe, 95 million on it. There was another number that was floated in the press of 156 million. So we respectfully said, what is it that you're asking for? Let us know. And by the way, can you give us the backup for that? I also mentioned that we were unsure of the process and that we needed the attorneys to opine on that. Mr. Karasik and I met with Dr. Pons, the business administrator, and the board's attorney, and they got back to us with a date on October 12th. At that meeting, Mr. Karasik, and I can let him speak more to what transpired and what his expert advice was about processes to make sure that this could be done legally, statutorily, which is what governs these procedures, ladies and gentlemen. At that October 12th meeting, Mr. Karasik gave his legal opinion. We asked the board for their legal opinion. We were told that we would have to wait and they would get back to us, which they haven't done now. It's now October 19th. It's a week later. Meanwhile, there's a meeting last night where apparently we said, no, you can't do anything till you get approval from the state. Nowhere did we ever say that. And when I say we, I'm one of 5 on this board, by the way. It's not my board. I just happen to have the honor of chairing it. We never made a requirement about you had to have state funding first or state approval on the funding before we would meet again. We've been saying all along we want to meet again. I'm still waiting to hear from the attorneys, and their attorney, by the way, which we still haven't heard from. Then this morning, or yesterday afternoon, late yesterday, I got a text from the superintendent that the superintendent and the business administrator wanted to talk to me. I got back first thing when I got the message for a 10 o'clock conference call. 10 o'clock came and went, 10:15, 10:30, and I said, are we still having the call? We're dealing with an emergency right now. We'll call you in 30 minutes. That would have been 11 o'clock this morning. It's now 20 minutes to 8. I still haven't heard from anybody. So I know facts get in the way, and it's a problem, but let's stop with the absurdity here. We have been saying all along that we wanted to meet. Oh, and by the way, I have the September 17th request for the BOSC to meet. I have nothing past that for another meeting. So I'm not sure what we're delaying or what we're blocking or any of this other nonsense that I'm hearing. There has been no request, period. That's the way it works. We don't sit here as a Board of School Estimate and say, you know what, I think they had a meeting last night, or I think I saw something in the paper, perhaps we should convene a meeting. It's not the way it works statutorily, for obvious reasons. So let's not let the facts, get too much in the way here. Put the rhetoric aside. We want to do everything we can to help the schools and to make sure that we've been asking for this information. Former Mayor Jackson and I, Councilman Spiller, when he was on the BOSC with me back in 2013, we've been asking for this information. We've never received anything that had to do with the physical structure of the building, despite our numerous asks. I know that's in the past. Nobody wants to hear about the past, move forward, but the past is important here. And I think it's patently unfair the way that the Board of School Estimate is being treated in this whole process. Enough is enough. Of course we want to meet. We don't have a crystal ball. If we stay a type 1 school district on November 3rd, we'll at least have that information. We hit the ground running and we can do what needs to be done. So please, don't let the facts get in your way. Those are the facts, period. Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, but I have heard way too much on this issue that is just patently false. Thank you.
Well, no, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Deputy Mayor. There was a question in one of the callers, and I think you have addressed it, so thank you. Okay.
Mayor.
Councilman
I
Russo.
just got a message that Alma Schneider was on, or maybe still on, to speak for the disabilities group. They definitely wanted to say something today about disabilities because it's a month that we're not doing a proclamation, but she wanted me to say that she's trying to be on and got cut off and her comment couldn't be heard. I don't know what to do about that, but Alma Schneider just sent me that message. It's a month dealing with disabilities in employment, dealing with employment disabilities. It's Employment Disabilities Awareness Month. That's what I think it's about. And of course, they're going to meet this week and have a session on Thursday. So I'll just apologize that we couldn't get them on. Thank you, Mayor.
No, well, thank you for, honestly, it sounds like conveying her sentiments there. And certainly we all know information is important. Knowledge is power. Having people be aware is an important piece of it. So thank you for bringing that to light and sharing that on her behalf. I think it's important, certainly always that we're out there using the bully pulpit to make sure we're drawing attention and awareness. So hopefully people can take actions and address appropriately. So very appropriate. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have, as you see on the agenda, we will be receiving a number of individuals regarding the Montclair Free Public Library. That's Mr. Rob Benecke from Benecke Economics, Keith Balla, and David Gannon from PKF O'Connor Davies. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Stafford to help facilitate that conversation regarding the Free Public Library. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe Mr. Gannon will speak first, and I believe he has, yes, he does. I was going to say he has rights to share, so I will toss it to you, Mr. Gannon. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Mr. Balla couldn't be with me tonight, but Mr. Balla was involved in the engagement. We were engaged by the township to perform a forensic audit of the library. And what I would say is that, oftentimes when we do a forensic audit, we may not necessarily find fraud or abuse. However, often enough, we do find areas where we identify opportunities for improvement. And that's what we found here as it relates to this engagement with the library. And really our findings and recommendations mostly revolve around development of the library budget and in manners in which that could probably be improved. One item that we know for years that the library has received additional funding over and above the statutory minimum. The statutory minimum is almost $2.7 million. And really going forward, we would recommend that the library build their budget so that it's based on the statutory minimum that's provided by statute. And then anything really over and above that should really be provided to the governing body in detail to ensure that there's a full understanding of why the library may need additional funds, what those programs are for, just an overall much more robust, transparent presentation of their needs compared to what's compared to what's currently being provided to the governing body. Also, what we noted as we reviewed the library's budget, both in 19 and 20, other revenues outside of state aid or the township tax levy were fell well short of budgeted amounts. We also noted that in both 19 and 20, the adjusted library budget included prior fund balance as a funding source of the budget. In both years, we found that the amount of fund balance being utilized in the budget was, very significant percentage of the overall total amount of fund balance that was available to the library, which is not necessarily a good practice. We also found, as it relates to our understanding that in 2020, the Bellevue Avenue branch was closed due to the pandemic. We inquired with the library as to what were those cost savings that they realized as a result of that closure. And the library really could not provide us with documentation showing that they really had any cost savings. We also inquired about programs changing from in-person to virtual, and whether that resulted in cost savings. And again, the library wasn't able to provide any documentation to show to us that there was cost savings as a result of that. We also did note, one item, the library did contracted with a company to clean both facilities at about $5,000 a month. We noted that although that both branches were either closed or even closed to the public, they continue to make those payments to the cleaning service, even though it would appear that it may not be necessary. We recommend that each program be evaluated for other opportunities for funding of different funding sources, whether it be grants or other types of sources. We also recommend them considering developing a budget by branch location. Currently, they do an overall budget. However, if they did a budget by branch location, that may give them just a little bit more information, a better idea where they spend their money. And then in the future, if something were to occur, similar to what happened the last couple of years, that they would have a better understanding of what the potential cost savings might be. Again, in 2021, they also had in their budget about $180,000 from the prior year's fund balance, which again represented a very significant amount of the overall percentage of fund balance. And one other item, that we looked at when we looked at the 2021 budget on the expenditure side, as we looked at the detail, there was a couple line items that caught our attention. It appeared that pension benefits were budgeted twice, resulting in about $280,000 that appeared to be not necessary, as well as an expense item labeled designated funds to transfer in 2022 of $260,000. In my view, it would appear that the budget may be overstated $540,000 if those were truly budgeted categories. With that, I think Robert Benecke is going to go through some thoughts of his own.
Are there any questions out there before I get started?
Mr.
Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that presentation, Mr. Gannon. Couple real quick questions. How much is the library receiving on the statutory requirement for 2022, roughly?
Statutory minimum is $2.7 million.
Okay. And then how much above the statutory requirement would the library receive in 2022?
In 2021, they received $420,000 in addition to the statutory minimum.
And then how many tax points is the statutory requirement roughly? What would that equate to on a, Bob, maybe you know this if David doesn't.
It's approximately 4 tax points.
And then with the addition over the statutory requirement, what does that look like?
It's just over another half a tax point, so in total between 4.5 and 5 tax points.
During the process was a reason, I noticed in one of the slides that Mr. Gannon just put up, was there a reason given by the library board why the Bellevue branch remained closed, even though there were no attendant cost savings during the closure?
There was not any, no reason was given.
And what corrective actions, I guess, are we looking at going forward in terms of the process?
So I would suggest that the library, in a very early stage of the budget process, because the budget process starts very early at the township level. Budget development starts well before year end. It's not something that starts after year end. So I think the library really needs to come to the governing body. Again, building this budget based off the statutory minimum requirement that's permitted, that's allowed by statute. And if they feel that they need additional monies, that a very detailed analysis is provided to the governing body to really reflect what they're spending their money on. I think the prior budgets that have been provided to the governing body may not have been, lack detail. So I think, with the questions that have been raised, I think it would be prudent to have a much more transparent, robust amount of documentation as provided to the governing body, so that you can make a more informed decision.
Fair enough. And Mr. Gannon, you had said too, I think in one of the points that you made, that there's no budget by location. It's just a general.
Correct. Yeah, they don't provide a budget by branch level. It's really just one overall budget. For this year, it may not be possible to develop that this quickly. But perhaps, years going forward, it's something that they should look to build upon. It's probably not a 1-year process, to be fair. It's going to be something that would need to be done over a couple of years to be able to kind of capture those costs by location accurately.
Is that done in other municipalities that you're familiar with, where if they've got multiple locations, there's a breakout by location so that the governing body in those instances can, take a look? Or how is that usually done in your experience?
I'm not really aware of many that do necessarily do it that way. It's not often that there are multiple branches within the municipality. So often it doesn't come up.
Mr. Benecke, do you have any experience on that point? I know you've got quite a.
Yeah, there's typically, it's not broken out by branch, but typically the branches are treated, how should I say, equally. But you pointed out that there was a closure that wasn't in sync or synchronized over the last year or so. So at this one hand, it's typically not broken out in terms of the locations. Jersey City might be in Newark, but beyond the bigger cities, they're not. At the same time, the branches are generally kept, in equal footing. And obviously we had that issue this year. Just wanted to also note that one of the callers, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor Council, mentioned Hackensack and Millburn, I believe it was. Maybe one or two others. Well, Hackensack and Millburn do not receive any amounts over and above the statutory third of a mil. There's 565 municipalities in New Jersey. We try not to get into comparisons, as we've talked to this governing body and other governing bodies over the last many years. And the reason for that is we have, obviously major metropolitan, if you will, cities like Jersey City and Newark. And we also have very small towns, not too far from Montclair, within 50 miles, Walpack, Sandyston, I can go on and on. So we have this disparity of size, and we also have disparity of services. A lot of towns, like for example, Hackensack, not only has full-time paid fire, but they also collect their garbage locally, as many other towns do of our size and up, but most small towns don't. As a matter of fact, many large towns don't either. So that's just an aside. So that's one point. What we did is we've put together an agreement going forward, the proposed agreement for the library and the governing body, township manager to consider so that there's less friction or less confusion or less uncertainty when it comes to the library funding. For example, we have a list of 7 terms and conditions. One is equal access to free public library services. That would be both branches, virtually, the buckle system, etc. Second is to provide a detail by October 30th, October 31st of each year to the CFO as we go into the budget cycle. Third is that any changes in any programs, hours, staffing, and the like, be presented to the township manager and township council. Fourth, and this goes along with Mr. Gannon indicated as part of his audit, as individual anticipated budget revenue items should not exceed the amount that we actually received in the prior year. So if we have $10 last year, we don't budget $12 this year in anticipation of getting more money. And that's a rule under the local budget law that we have to follow as one of our 565 municipalities in New Jersey. The fifth is that we have a budget versus actual for the CFO to review, especially those amounts that are over and above the third of a mil. Sixth is to pursue all available grants and other funding. Again, that's Mr. Gannon's recommendation as well. And then finally is to provide consistent plans, policies, programs, etc. It's more of a policy level, but again, it's to get the point across of having to ensure services between the 2 branches and also virtually buckle system and during any other service interruptions. 7 clear points for the council, for the manager during his deliberations to consider an amount of above and beyond the third of a mil. And there's 565 towns, and keep in mind that there's 4 methods of developing and structuring a library. 240 or thereabouts of the 565 towns are organized like we are. It's a municipal library that's enabled by statute. Another 50 are more of a nonprofit association. Some are regional libraries, there's a handful of those, and there's also county libraries that actually have municipal branches, and the county actually runs the library. There's many of those as well. So we're sort of all over the map, and of course, many towns don't have a library. Again, we can talk about Walpack and Sanderson, there's a lot in South Jersey, etc. And by the way, last count, there was almost 100 municipalities that had no police department. So again, that gets the point across that comparisons are awful difficult to make in New Jersey because of the slippery slope of disparate municipal budgets and finances. With that said, we do have these 7 proposed terms and conditions for the library board to move forward to correct the conditions that Mr. Gannon and his colleagues sought and to make a more seamless and a more collegial budget process going forward.
Well, thank you, Mr. Benecke, and certainly to our auditors for presenting and the questions there. And I'll also note, and I think this is an important piece to note on a few fronts. First and foremost, we have had conversations with the library board president and representatives with this specific information and looked at those recommendations as well. And I think I want to make it very clear out there that they are and remain true partners in this work. I can tell you that from some of the basic budgeting pieces that were outlined and highlighted, there were things like accounting for unspent dollars from the previous budget as revenue, describing dollars that left at the end, fund balance as expenses. They tend to inflate budgets and give a distorted concept of what's there. So they had those general practices, and in our conversations, again, not going to speak to fully how it's all finalized, but I think they were very receptive and understanding of the dynamics and the challenges caused through those practices and open to changing those forthwith. Also noted that I believe they were trying to do their diligence. Some of the things that were brought up in terms of why those cleaning fees were paid when there was, obviously the branches and pieces were closed. These apparently were questions that they had been asking as well. Not sure if they'd gotten answers to, but they had been asking. And it also matters when apparently they've also been asking about the double pension payment listings. That matters when we talk about the monies that's needed, and we all remember dollars that were discussed in terms of what was needed to continue operations. When those are double listed, that artificially inflates your cost that you think you need. And if that was the case, potentially those dollars were not needed to function as needed to move through the year. So I think they certainly recognize those pieces as well, and we all recognize that we're quite frankly on the same side of the coin, even on this issue, and making sure we're providing these services, but doing it in a way that provides equity and access throughout the township, and also addresses the financial pieces to make sure it's done in compliance with the laws and as appropriate. Specific to the question, I heard one of the callers talk about of dollars even for the remainder of this year. I know that our CFO had discussions with that same group and said, listen, at minimum, she would need to see, and she's on here now, could speak to it if she so desires, need to see budget, actual versus budgeted, even for now and moving forward in this time frame, and some other financial parameters to ensure that the numbers line up and everything is appropriate. And then, of course, going forward, as Mr. Benecke noted, those recommendations on really best practices would be the things that are implemented more medium to long term, for the future budget. So I think certainly after the meeting started in and left in a very positive place, outlined some very clear specifics even for the remainder of this year's budget, and clearly defined those and who the communication should occur between. And then, of course, those recommendations and pieces, we all know why they would exist there. If you've got budgets that are off and certainly didn't need certain dollars that may have been indicated, we all want to make sure those numbers are accurate and correct. We know that we still remain in COVID times and budgets are tight and the challenges still lay ahead. So again, appreciate their conversation and their work, and certainly appreciate the work of our staff on this in terms of identifying all these different pieces and working with the team that has been brought in to kind of look at these pieces and again make sure that we're being good stewards both in services and dollars. And certainly to my colleagues on the finance committee for giving this a thorough review and making sure that there's a clear path and opportunity here moving forward. And certainly to all my council colleagues as we look at this, again, part of our commitment to making sure we're providing services. And again, when we even allocated additional dollars for the library, making sure, again, that equity piece was a component and that we had branches open and providing the services. So that's a commitment that remains, and we're going to continue that work for sure. So Mr. Benecke and others also appreciate you explaining things in the way you do, Mr. Benecke, in terms of making it very clear and easy to understand. That's always appreciated. And certainly thank you to our auditors as well for the work that was done. And again, a big thank you to the library board. I know that they've looked over these pieces. We've had these conversations, and right from the start, very positive, and them looking to look at pieces here that can help make this process even better in terms of not only communication but outcomes and process. So thank you to all involved. Bottom line, appreciate the information. Any additional questions or comments?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to follow up on my questions. I'm sorry, Mr. Cummings, real quick. I had started before, and Mr. Benecke, if you could help me, given that there were, as we said, a overstatement of costs as well, and when we were getting the requests for more funding, the impression was given that the budget, the library's budget was almost at zero or very low, shall we say. How much money was actually in the budget based on the audit findings and the processes that we've just gone through when those asks were being made?
Well, early on in the process, we had approximately $260,000 as the added municipal appropriation. So we finalized the amount, as David noted, approximately $420,000. The introduced budget this year in 2021 for the library purposes was $319,000, $320,000, and you and your colleagues unanimously voted, I believe it was unanimous, to add an extra and restore an extra $100,000 so that the Bellevue branch could open. Belleville branch could open.
Bellevue, you had it right the first time.
Okay. Tim always looks at me cross-eyed when I get that conflated. and we also, added that $100,000, and we also had this audit done so that we can, as the mayor noted, make everything better and going forward.
So my question was, though, there was money already in the line items, if you were, at the time that the ask was made, and it wasn't as dire as it was first perceived to be. I think.
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, we were trying to work with the library hand in glove throughout the process to make sure that they did have enough money. At the same time, we were concerned that the audit was coming out. It was July at that point. Mr. Gannon, several people, Mr. Balla, et cetera, over at the audit firm were looking at things and making sure that we had everything right and in order.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Cummings.
No worries. I just wanted to add that I think our meeting yesterday set a real positive tone in terms of how to go forward. And as much as we've talked numbers tonight, I think one of the things that we agreed upon was better communication. So as we move forward, so the conversation tonight was a good one, necessary one. But for those other counselors who weren't part of that, if you hear this, you hear these numbers and those numbers. I just want to say that I think the board and the meeting that we had agreed with a lot of the questions that we put forward, but also we all agreed that, it was necessary. And moving forward, I think we'll be in a much better discussion points and better positive reaction in terms of why we ask questions, why they give us answers, and how we do things together. So I think we left that meeting yesterday with an understanding that it was necessary, and we look forward to continuing those discussions. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Certainly, thank you, Councilman Cummings. And I think that my comments tried to marry all of that. I think that's what makes for a great balance. I think the Deputy Mayor noted some of the pieces, the positive piece, and certainly I wanted to marry that all together. It's a yes and all of that. Both of you, of course, are correct fully. And we look forward to that work going ahead together. Any other questions, concerns, comments?
Me, Mayor? I don't know if you can see me.
I cannot right now. You're not on my screen, but Councilman Yacobelis.
Sorry about that. Thank you. So I guess this is probably for Mr. Gannon. So I'm just trying to understand, just in terms of benchmarking against, the work that you do normally. What percentage of your work would you say is dedicated to auditing libraries?
Depending on what, the town may have a library that we typically audit the library in conjunction with the municipality. In this case, with Montclair, we are not the appointed auditors for the library. So I would say, I probably do 5 libraries in a given year. Usually fairly small.
Thank you. And that just helps me with the next question, which is where does Montclair sort of stack up against? Like, does it sort of sit with the mass, or does it come out as an outlier?
Well, as part of our engagement, we really didn't do benchmarking per se. I think Mr. Benecke kind of alluded to it that, depending on the community, it could be so vastly different. So certainly, we do have some libraries that have funding over and above the statutory minimum. Many that are at the statutory minimum. Again, with the variety of practices, we have a number of libraries where payroll and most of the expenses are actually handled at the township level. And there's very few financial transactions that occur at the library itself. And some of those could be, very significant size libraries, on par with the size of the township, where a lot of the financial controls and a lot of the internal controls and the restrictions are actually at the township level and not the library. So, where in this case, the Montclair Library controls most of their dollars, or, all their dollars, and they manage them, at the library level. So, from a benchmarking perspective, it's tough to say, only because there's such a varied amount of practices.
But would you say there's something that jumped out that alarmed you that was, just, completely different from other audits you've done? I'm just trying to understand, do we have a real problem here in Montclair, or is this a situation where, we audited the library, and like if you audited any entity, you would find opportunities for improvement?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that if you do a performance audit, for the most part, you're going to find opportunities for improvement. And as I stated up front, we were engaged in perform a forensic audit. And a lot of times when people hear forensic, they think fraud, undue types of transactions and wrongdoing. And very often than not, we do a forensic audit and we're confirming that, It's not necessarily a situation where people are doing things wrong on purpose or in a way that they're gaining financially. It's just a matter that, perhaps they don't either have the resources or the knowledge or the skills in order to effectively develop a budget or, manage the budget per se. And I think just from my perspective I think that, the communication may have been very guarded between the library and the township, and whether they were fully forthcoming on everything they should have been. But, when I look at their budget, I do have questions as to, why things are being presented a certain way. And then when I have those questions, then it makes me think as to, well, are they being fully transparent? Are they really being fully, open with what, what their needs are? So, our real, what we came away from it as is that there really needs to be a better budgeting process, more information shared with the governing body and the township professionals, because again, if you're looking for an amount of money that is significantly over what's required by statute, you really should be providing that information. That's only fair.
I think, Dave, if you don't mind, Councilor Yacobelis, I think if you go to the one slide, the findings and recommendations, slide 2 of 5, and you see where the library has consistently over budget other revenue items, we on the municipal side would not be allowed to do that. We would be barred from doing that by the state oversight. Of course, Maja, my license, Chris Macaluso's license would prevent us from actually placing that into the budget. So I think that's one area that's a problem. In addition, the consistently over budgeting other revenues, which is related to that from the Library Foundation by $100,000 a year, which is slide 3 of 5, we would not be able to do that as well on the municipal side. And we're trying to have the two laws and the two regulations and rules, sit on top of one another seamlessly. So those would be 2 points where if it was in our audit report, we would get questioned by the state and maybe even rise to a level 2 or 3 years in a row where our licenses would be questioned. So.
Thank you for that. And I guess for either of you, just one more question, just in terms of process. How much was the library staff involved in the audit? Was there back and forth directly with the staff? Was it just with council, our staff? Was it just with the board?
We worked directly with the library executive director and his staff.
Okay.
So all requests were given to them, and certainly more than ample time was given. This process is kind of, taken some time. So it's not as though we, requested the information and made a rush to finalize a report. This was over several months. So no requests, all requests were provided ample time to provide us the information.
Thank you. And I'll just close out by saying, the reason I asked that is because of just the qualitative component to answers and data as well. I just wanted to make sure, that has the qualitative piece, not just the quantitative piece, the explanation to go with it, the rationale, the thinking behind, and we weren't just, looking at numbers on a page. So thank you for that.
Hey, Peter, quick question for you. Do you have any issue with the veracity of the report?
No.
Okay.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? Okay, seeing none, again, I want to thank all of you, for doing that work. And I think, as was stated, an opportunity to look at the pieces to make sure that we are getting those services as needed, make sure we've got equity throughout the township with our library, making sure we're being good fiscal stewards. So thank you to all for engaging in that process. And I think the outcome speaks for itself, and certainly appreciate the library and the library board for being partners in this work and partners moving forward. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thanks for being on.
Thank you.
Okay, next, moving on, we have the approval of minutes. They've been presented to the council, the minutes from January 5th and January 19th, 2021. Without objection, I so move. Is there objection? It's been moved. Are there any modifications, questions, concerns with the minutes?
Second.
Okay. Um,
Did you
all
move?
in favor? All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed, abstentions. Okay, thank you very much. The minutes are approved. Next, we have pending ordinances for second reading. First is Ordinance O-21-24. This is an ordinance authorizing the execution of a financial agreement between the Township of Montclair, New Jersey, and 65 Church Street Urban Renewal LLC, Block 2208, Lot 17. I'm going to open a public hearing without objection. Is there any objection? Okay, seeing no objection. Mr. Stafford, is there anyone in the queue who wishes to be heard in regard to this ordinance?
Negative, Mayor.
Okay, without objection, I'm going to close the hearing. Okay, so I move this ordinance.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions, concerns, comments from colleagues? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Counselor Cummings,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hurlock,
Yes.
Counselor Price Abrams,
Yes.
Counselor Russo,
Yes.
Counselor Schlager,
Yes.
Counselor Yacovelis,
Yes.
Mayor Spiller.
Yes. Next is Ordinance O-21-25, which is refunding bond ordinance to the Township of Montclair, Community of Essex, refunding all or portion of the general improvement refunding bond series 2014A, and I so move.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. I'm going to open a public hearing without objection. Is there objection? Hearing no objection, Mr. Stafford, I turn it over to you. Anyone wishing to be heard on this refunding bond ordinance?
Negative, Mayor.
Okay. All right. Without objection, we'll close the hearing. Is there objection? Okay. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Counselor Cummings,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hurlock,
Yes.
Counselor Price Abrams,
Yes.
Counselor Russo,
Yes.
Counselor Schlager,
Yes.
Counselor Yacovelis,
Yes.
Mayor Spiller.
Yes. Next is Ordinance O-21-26, which is an ordinance of the Township Council, Township of Montclair, County of Essex, State of New Jersey, approving the transfer of financial agreement from PF Montclair Urban Renewal LLC to 11 Pine Urban Renewal LLC, and I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Without objection, I'm going to open the hearing to the public. Is there objection?
No.
Hearing no objection, Mr. Stafford, I'll turn to you. Any public comment?
There is no one in the queue, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Without objection, I'm going to close the hearing. Any objection? All right, seeing no objection. Any questions, concerns, or comments from my council colleagues?
Yes.
Mayor, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Bob.
One at a
Go ahead.
time. I've
Go
got
ahead, David.
No,
Counselor
Bob,
Cummings.
please, I defer to you.
Okay, I just want to ask, this is the facility or the building that we're going to try to make sure we keep 4 good community services in, right? So that's just all I'd like to encourage, that gets done, because people really want to see the succeed together and brother to brother, sister to sister. And if all 4 services, if we can keep that going, it's been an agreement for so many years. And I know we're all working on it, the town attorney and others, but just hopefully that's going to work out. Thank you. Go ahead, David.
So, well, specific to your question, is this location? The answer is yes. And certainly we all want to see that happen as well. Mr. Karasik, do you have anything to add to that piece before Mr. Cummings does, to answer Councilman Russo?
Well, the purchaser of the property to whom this pilot's going to be transferred, assuming that the ordinance is passed, has agreed to enter into a lease to continue these organizations in place. And well, the lease is to continue the township's control of that space for the lifetime of the pilot. So they've been very cooperative with us in order to maintain the situation as it is. So there's no reason why the status quo will change. This transfers, it will probably be the last thing before their closing, at which point the new purchaser will buy the property and the lease will will enter into a new lease with them. They've committed to the new lease. So I urge you to approve the transfer.
Okay, Councilman Cummings?
Yes, Ira, I do want to acknowledge that this is a great development. But reading the lease, I would like to have the opportunity to speak to the owners of this building. And I would encourage any council member who wants to participate, because I think that, there's a couple of things that in the lease that I'd like to hear, why and just hear from them. And I think it'd be good for others to hear, because this is a pretty significant opportunity. But we got here, we're here, but I still have a couple of things that I'd like to hear directly from the owners. And I appreciate if you could set up a call.
I'm
And
sure,
anybody can join if they like.
I'm sure we can set up something. I should point out, just for the public, I guess, that the space will be rent-free. In fact, it's continued to be rent-free over the life of the pilot, which I say is another 16 years. I mean, the issues, I'm not sure what issues you'd like to talk about, but of course I'm sure we can set up a meeting to talk about any issues you'd like.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And again, I offer at least 2 counselors can join if they like.
Well, I'd like to say, thank you, David. I'd like to be involved because I was involved 20 years ago when we did the whole development of that area. We have, the senior building, we've got this and the new parking garage, and all that was put together with Councilman Charles Smith, your predecessor, the fourth ward, and me as mayor. And I certainly want to make sure these people understand the history and that we keep Sophia and all the other programs going. Thank you.
Bob, I want to be very clear, and I'm sure Brian will understand this. I'm the predecessor of Dr. Renee Baskerville, not Charles Smith. Charles is my cousin, but I would hate for Renee to call me in the morning. How would you let Councilman Baskerville, how would you let Councilman Russo not, acknowledge me like that? So I just want to let
I didn't mean it
everybody know.
that way. Just get this clear. I meant he's one of your predecessors, just like Sandra Lang was.
That's better.
Bobby Riley was, okay? I know you you came in right after Renee, but the whole group of them, you have big shoes to fill. They were all great, and you're the best now.
I don't want the 6 a.m. phone call.
All right. And with that, I'll say certainly as you're hearing, there's a meeting, and certainly up to 2 others can join. I think it's a good thing in that the pressure, I'll argue the conversations and others have yielded great results. Mr. Krasik, I will say specifically to you and certainly to the other side that you've had conversations with, have to offer a kudos. It wasn't that long. We're all on here hearing about something that was set to not happen and expire, and obviously individuals be charged rent. We all know, and we've seen the turnaround, and it's absolutely because I know a lot of the conversations you've had, Mr. Krasik, and certainly we've been in conversation throughout. I know with Councilman Cummings and others to make sure that they understand the importance of this location to us and the opportunity to have these entities there and continue the good work at that zero rent rate. And certainly, again, because of you, I think imparting that, and certainly to their good understanding of that as well. So kudos to them as well for getting that. And here we are now, to the councilman's point, nuancedly asking questions about this piece or that piece. But where we are is continuing into the next agreement here, the same arrangement, which would be, not paying rent and moving forward and us having the control over the space. That is a massive development, big change from where we were, not to be understated. And as they say, hate to bury the lead, right? Let's be clear on it. That's what we've just accomplished here, gotten that to go forward in that manner. So it's a testament again to everybody here on the council, and certainly Mr. Krasik, your work in this case specifically, and certainly everybody on staff. So just want to take a moment to say thank you. There's always the questions and a lot, and appropriately so, but needs to be the acknowledgement of the good work that's happened to get us here as well. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Did we do that was the question. Any other questions, concerns, comments on this ordinance before we go to the vote? Here, Councilwoman, please, Abrams.
Just to also extend my appreciation to our town attorney and to the rest of the staff, because as you noted, this was a significant turnaround, and just amplify that one more time. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Any other questions, concerns, comments? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Counselor Cummings,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hurlock,
Yes.
Counselor Price Abrams,
Yes.
Counselor Russo,
Yes.
Counselor Schlager,
Yes.
Counselor Yacobelis,
Yes.
Mayor Spiller.
Yes. Next, we have a consent agenda, items 1 through 7. Without objection, I will so move. Is there objection? All right, it's items 1 through 7 have been moved. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear a second, Mayor.
I seconded it, actually.
Well,
Okay,
I did
thank
move it without objection.
You
so
did
that's
move
good.
without objection. Belts and suspenders, I also seconded it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we get a third?
Counselor Cummings,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hurlock,
Yes.
Counselor Price Abrams,
Yes.
Counselor Russo,
Yes.
Counselor Schlager,
Yes.
Counselor Yacobelis,
Yes.
Mayor Spiller.
Yes. Next is Resolution R-21-202, which is a resolution regarding the suspension of meter collection on Saturday, November 27th, 2021 for Small Business Saturday and during the 2021 holiday shopping period. I know this is something that we have consistently done here in town and work to do, and certainly even in the difficult economic times here during the pandemic. I know it's yet another example of a commitment, that we all share in trying to, again, balance the resources that we have, but put them to good use to help support the community as a whole, and certainly in this case, our small businesses. So happy to move that resolution.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions, concerns, comments? Councilman Yacobelis.
Just a comment and just a thought. I know we're going to talk about this at the end of our agenda, but just kind of given the crisis that's happening with the parking meters, I wonder if we want to entertain starting this immediately.
Well, before that, I want to just add that Counselor Price Abrams and I in a recent bid meeting had a good discussion, and one of the things I'm sure they're appreciative of is that we've added this a lot sooner. And if you remember last year, a little bit timing wasn't the best, and I know the bid members were very happy that we were able to get this on earlier, so that now they have time to promote this and let folks know about it. So I think that is a very timely and a very good thing, and just want to acknowledge the work that that Lori and I have worked with them. I think it's the beginning of a kind of good way of making sure we're communicating ahead of time and not react.
Okay. And I think, Mr. Stafford, maybe you could speak to, just starting earlier, there is a cost with these things. I know generally, what is a rough cost, Mr. Stafford, month over month, generally of something like this? I know you won't have an exact number, but.
Well, it's tough to predict for 2021, Mayor, based on the circumstances caused by the pandemic and the anomalous conditions that we're experiencing with respect to parking. In a normal year, the cost of the township is approximately $48,000 for the month.
Okay.
So, sorry.
Yep, Councilman.
So I would just say, look, I think it'll be less than that, just kind of given the trajectory. I think typically we look at about 1.4 million, I think was 2019. And I think last year was between 500,000 and 600,000 in revenue. And this year, so far, we're just north of 600,000 in revenue. So I think we're trending less than half. So maybe if we extrapolate, we're looking at 24,000 or somewhere between 20 and 30,000 in cost. I'm just raising this as an idea because we have a crisis that you all know. Of course, this is not news to anyone. You just need to walk up Bloomfield Avenue or Walnut Street and check that most of the meters are not working right now for whatever reason. Batteries are out. They're not transmitting properly with 2G chips. And it's a huge problem. There's a lot of confusion. And I think this could be a creative way to give us more time to figure out the solutions through the end of the year and the holiday season, and create some relief, frankly, for people who are trying to find parking spots. So I'd like to make a motion that we amend this to start effective tomorrow.
Okay, so this is a motion to amend. Do you have a second?
I'm trying to figure out, Mayor, excuse me. What are we going to talk about later that is connected with this before we do that? Because I'm looking at an ordinance that was sent, which has changes.
But I have a question. So there would be no parking? I mean, you would be able to park at meters all day, every day? Endlessly?
No, it would be extending the free 2-hour parking
2
for the
hours?
holiday season at each meter.
Starting immediately, correct, is your motion? So it would be, yes, though, right, all day for 2 hours.
How do if you could, somebody can remind me, maybe Mr. Stafford and Mr. Scantlebury, can you remind me, how do you keep track of the 2 hour? How does a meter person keep track that a car's there for 2 hours?
Very hard to do, but we generally mark the sidewalk so that we can comply with federal law.
Mark the sidewalk? Oh,
Correct, or the street. We're not allowed to mark tires.
right, that's what I was asking.
There was a federal case that actually ruled that you can't mark the tires. So.
Right. So what happens to residents who have parking permits that they're paying for the next 2 months, 3 months? If it's November and December, what happens to those permits if somebody perhaps took a chance and parked all day? Well, I don't people spend money on permits.
Well, I think as I'm trying to, under Robert's rules, I'm very mindful here. We've got a motion, if this is germane to the motion, but I do want to, no, I don't mean it that way, Councilwoman, but I'm just walking that line. But I will say, I would argue this is a little bit of why we do have the process. If people want to discuss and debate this, I know that the Councilwoman Price Abrams and Councilman Cummings have talked to the bid. There is an opportunity to, talk about this, and but the motion's been made to start it immediately. There has not been a second yet, so I will go back to that, and if not, we're moving on to the resolution.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay.
Let me ask one question for.
Well, just as a Councilman, you've moved it as a motion right now. There's no second. We can't really debate. That's why I said we're kind of walking that line, and you to speak to a thing that hasn't been seconded. So is there a second? If not, we'll move on with the resolution itself, and then it could be right back to the Councilman for debate. Okay. Seeing none, Councilman, would you like to speak to the resolution, which is R-21-202 as written? Councilman Yankovic.
Thanks, Mayor. I was going to ask Mrs. Stafford how long it would take to make sure the staff was set up to be able to start this, because then I would move to implement it, not necessarily tomorrow, but potentially just earlier, such as November 1st. And the other thing I just wanted to comment on to Councilor Schlager's questions is we're talking about metered spots, not permit spots. So the two, don't need to be conflated. We're not taking away spots from anybody with a permit. This is strictly being able to park at a meter for 2 hours, which we do for the whole holiday shopping season anyway. And I'm looking to expand that because we've got a crisis with most meters. I shouldn't say most, many meters not working right now in town. And this would be able to buy us some time to address that, which is separate from our discussion later, which is just about violations with regard to parking at meters that are broken.
Well, certainly, I know that Councilwoman Schlager, I'll note, has been working on some parking pieces, I know, diligently, and she might have some pieces that speak exactly to that, Councilman, hopefully. So maybe, Councilwoman, I'll ask you to speak to some of those in this meeting a little later, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Councilwoman Price Abrams.
So I know this is again, a conversation that's slightly conflated with the other proposed matter we're going to take up, but I know I had an experience just yesterday where I pulled on Walnut Street at 8 o'clock or so in the morning. I looked for a meter. It was dark. I couldn't tell if it was because it was before the hours of service, and I realized that didn't make sense. I pulled to a different one. I turned around and parked on the other side. In the end, every meter I could find had a dark screen, and I couldn't even slip my credit card in to make the payment. I double checked later that the hours, which weren't visible without the screen to inform whoever was driving. I'm just giving you an illustration that I think everybody here may have had recently, if you drive and park in town, that this has become like too much. It's not the anecdotal. I know sometimes we have a concern that it's about someone jamming the quarters or slugs or other things that may,
Well, but Councilwoman, much as like I did before, and I hear we're speaking to it, this definitely isn't germane to this motion, right? This motion is about suspension of holiday meters right
True.
now for this. You certainly raise it. I know the next one talks about this, which probably would be deemed germane, but
Got
this
it.
one is specifically about holiday shopping period. We've got a motion on that.
Well, if I may, Mayor, I'm sorry. So I was mentioning only because to the extent that Council Jacobellis was looking to sort of address the issues together. So I might be amenable to starting an amended version of what he said, and I'm just letting that be known, that we would at least survey the group to see if, Council Jacobellis, do you want to amend your motion?
I'd like an answer to the question if Mr. Stafford can, I know it's putting you on the spot, but just a sense of how long it would take to prepare the staff to be able to implement the program.
I really don't know. I'd be guessing. I don't know that they have, to the extent that they utilize actual bags or signs or what have you. I don't believe that they would have that on hand. The meters that have internal batteries that are able to power the meters could be programmed to say holiday parking or general absolution or whatever the governing body directs tonight. How quickly that could be done, I'd be guessing at this moment.
Okay. I would amend my motion then to say November 1st.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions, concerns, or comments on this motion?
Yes, Mayor. This is what I'm trying to get clear because I'm looking at something that we're going to discuss later that does impact this because it's a change in our policy of enforcement. This is the same thing in some ways, and would one contradict the other or would one complement the other? Would one be irrelevant if we do this? So this is what I'm trying to figure out. I'm in favor of what we're going to bring up later, perhaps. This, of course, I'm in favor of from the November 28th, which we always do right after Thanksgiving, I think it is. I'm willing to extend it even further, like you're asking, Peter. But you know, I think it's like the cart before the horse. So don't we need to do these two things in conjunction with each other? That's my dilemma right now.
Well, the beauty of it is we need to do them in the order they're moved, and it's been moved and seconded. So we've got this motion in front of us now, but certainly you have, full leeway to vote as you choose on that. Any other questions, concerns, comments?
Yeah, so Tim, if I heard you right, you're saying that our revenues are roughly between up to $50,000 a month. Councilor Jacobellis, based on recent interviews, says he thinks it's half of that. Is that what I heard earlier?
I said in a normal year, the holiday shopping period and Small Business Saturday costs approximately $48,000 in revenue lost.
Okay. And so now I'm assuming that if we extend this to November 1st, as just was brought up, in a period of time where we're still looking at lost revenue. And this is something that was basically, I think, what Councilor Jacobellis is attempting to do is to bring something extended to help others but the bid in our conversation was good with what we've normally done in the past. So, okay, so I just want to make sure I got understanding of what we're actually talking about, because I was somewhat confused based on the fact that we have another conversation about these meters and everything, which I think is more important. But now that unless I'm wrong, somebody tell me, but then we can move to a vote.
You're not wrong in what I've heard there. Councilman Jacobellis and then Councilwoman Schlager.
Thank you. So I'll just, for Councilor Russo, for you to know, what I'm asking for here is that we just extend our holiday shopping 2-hour courtesy free parking at meters earlier, given that we've got a crisis in town with so many meters being broken, which is creating a ton of confusion. I think, and this is to Councilor Cummings' point, when looking at the parking revenue numbers in a normal year, we're typically at the 48,000, but we're trending much closer to 2020 than to 2019 or previous years. So I think that number is probably closer to 25 or 30,000 versus the high 40s to consider. So if you extended this by an additional 3.5 weeks, again, we're doing a back of the napkin analysis here. You're probably looking at $25,000. Of course, can't know that for sure, but ballpark, that sort of feels like where things are based on numbers. Is that worth it to spend to alleviate for the balance of the year the parking challenges that we're having in our business, not just our business district, but all over? You can't find working meters a great majority of the time in many, many spots, and it's creating havoc, frankly, for people. So this is just a way to create temporary relief.
So the question I have, and maybe we had this discussion last week briefly, and Deputy Manager Scantlebury, what are the percentage of meters that are broken? Do we have that information?
Well, I don't have that for this week, no. But I have been talking to Mr. Germano about different methodologies and techniques to address this situation.
Okay. All right.
Well, Mr. Mayor, again, what I'm concerned about is knowing enough to vote on something even later, which would help us alleviate the problem that Peter's trying to address through this. This is something we always do around Thanksgiving. It's fine, 2-hour meter free. We've got a bigger issue of broken meters, people being ticketed when they can't get the money in and they can't comply with the law, which we've got a proposal to change so that people won't be punished. Now, how do these two things, are you saying, Peter, we pass this and we don't do the next step? Or
No,
going
these
for the
are
next step?
they're two different things. One is forever. One would be what we'll talk about later, and I'm mindful of the mayor's comments about staying on topic. But the one later is to address fundamentally something that would change forever, which is whether or not to fine people for parking at a spot that has a broken meter, and whether or not violation of our parking meter ordinance should result in possibly going to jail. That's what we're addressing. That addresses parking meters all the time, forever. What we're talking about right now is just the holiday season. It's a special promotion that we do as a township to give 2 hours of free parking at meters to support businesses. I'm asking that we extend that for a couple of weeks, starting it on November 1st, because we have an acute parking crisis right now in town with so many meters being broken through no fault of our own or the staff's, but just due to the fact that technology has been upgraded and 2G wireless chips in meters are no longer working and they're draining batteries. And there are supply chain issues, and the replacement parts that we need to fix meters are not available. So we don't have that exact number, but I will tell you right now, if you walk the north side of Walnut Street from Grove to Label Street, 80% of those meters are not working. If you walk around the post office, you'll find only 3 meters that are working on both sides of the street at the post office. If you go on Bloomfield Avenue, just going west from Lackawanna Plaza on the north side of Bloomfield Avenue, you will find more than half of those meters not working. These are just from my walks today. The screens do not work, the buttons are not responsive, they're not displaying the parking times or rules. So given that we have an acute crisis right now, that's just right now, that could potentially be solved with supply chain relief, with batteries coming in, whatever that is, I think we should consider extending the 2-hour free parking for the holiday shopping season to start on November 1st.
Okay. Now, I support the other effort that we're going to make, and I would support this if we started November 8th. That's my decision. So I can't support it starting as early as November 1st. Holiday
Okay.
season
All right,
starts
listen, we have a motion. Appreciate all the talking around this thing. I see how we're about to jump in on this. And people I think have spoken to it and spoken to it again. So anyone who hasn't spoken to it wish to speak to it? Otherwise, we'll move it to a vote. Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarification. I'm not sure what we're voting on right now. Are we voting on resolution R-21-202, which has the Saturday, November 27th date. I just want to make sure I know what I'm voting on.
No.
I've heard the 27th, I've heard the 1st, I've heard the 8th.
Yeah.
What are we voting on?
Do you want me to answer him if you, I mean, you can answer.
Somebody answer me, please.
You're voting on the amendment solely.
This is just the amendment to make it from November 22nd to November 1st, correct?
Correct. And if and after that, there's going to be a vote on the main motion, which will either have been amended or not, depending on the result of the vote.
And just so that we're all on the same page, the main motion was the 27th, correct?
Unless it's subsequently amended, yes.
I was just going by your words, Mr.
Yes.
Jurassic. You said main, so I'm trying to figure.
Yes,
Thank you.
correct. The main motion is the 27th.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got an amendment before us. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Counselor Cummings,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hurlock,
No.
Counselor Price Abrams,
Yes.
Counselor.
Wait a minute, I'm confused here then, Bill.
That's why I asked, David. We're
Right.
voting on moving it from the November 27th.
I want to go.
So may I just try to bring some order here? I believe the gentleman has moved to amend number 8, resolution 21-202, to read 2 hours of free parking at metered spaces throughout Montclair, commencing on November 1 and going through and including Sunday, December 26, 2021. That was the motion, that was the second, and I believe Robert's Rules of Orders requires an immediate moving to a vote.
Okay, well, I thought Bill had asked to explain if we were voting for the main one, which is the 27th.
Yeah, this
just
is
so that we all are on the same page with what I said, David. I said the main one, which is what Iris said, was the 27th, and we said we're voting on the amendment, which is the 1st. That's what
And I
we're
was
voting on right
confused.
now.
I need to
That's
retract my vote.
All right, Madam Clerk, so this is for the amendment. This is for the amendment to make it November 1st. All right, this is for the amendment to make it November 1st. Madam Clerk.
Counselor Cummings,
No.
Deputy Mayor Hurlock,
No again.
Counselor Price Abrams,
Yes.
Counselor Russo,
Abstain.
Counselor Schlager,
I wanted to say something before, but can I say something now?
Sure.
Okay, when we talk about loss of revenue, I think that you flipped what I said about permits. It's not that we would be taking away permits, is that people who buy permits by the month, which many people do, that we would lose additional revenue by some people not renewing their permits and parking on the street for a long time if the streets are not marked in a timely manner. That's what I was saying. And I and revenue is very meaningful these days to our town. So therefore I'm voting no.
Counselor Yacobelis,
Yes.
Mayor Spiller.
I'll also offer my piece. Then I think, I hear all the balance in that. I think the revenue is important at this time. And quite frankly, as I noted before, I know that Councilwoman Schlager has looked at some pieces to try and address these things. So I'm voting no. Okay, we're back to the main motion, which is R-21-202 as written. Any other questions, concerns, comments?
Well, I would like to make an amendment, Mayor, to make it November 8th, starting November 8th, to lessen the loss of revenue.
You have a motion for November 8th. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll on the amendment.
Counselor Cummings,
No.
Deputy Mayor Hurlock,
No.
Counselor Price Abrams,
Yes.
Counselor Russo,
Yes.
Counselor Schlager,
No.
Counselor Yacobelis,
Yes.
Mayor Spiller.
No. All right, we are back to the main motion, R-21-202 as written. Any questions, concerns, comments? Talked about this one. Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Counselor Cummings,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hurlock,
Yes.
Counselor Price Abrams,
Yes.
Counselor Russo,
Yes.
Counselor Schlager,
Yes.
Counselor Yacobelis,
Yes.
Mayor Spiller.
Yes. Next, we have a resolution R-21 203, which is a resolution awarding a contract for Maple Avenue Sanitary Sewer Manhole Rehabilitation, and I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions, concerns, or comments?
Yes, when is this expected to begin?
Mayor, would you like me to speak on that?
Sure.
The best answer I can give you, sir, is as soon as possible. This is CDBG funds that the township would receive through the county, and they're reprogramming funds, meaning the county has asked for shovel-ready projects, and timing is critical because in order for the township to qualify for the funding, the township has to have the project completed by the end of the year, 12/31/2021. So the schedule for, going to bid, receiving the bids, analyzing the bids, getting this on the agenda tonight, letting the contract and having the work commence and be finished is very aggressive. While I can't give you a distinct mobilization date, I would tell you it's going to move very fast so that we qualify for the funds.
And can we make sure that residents who will be impacted, whatever that impact will be, will get notice, to be prepared?
Of course.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Counselor Cummings,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hurlock,
Yes.
Counselor Price Abrams,
Yes.
Counselor Russo,
Yes.
Counselor Schlager,
Yes.
Counselor Yacovelis,
Yes.
Mayor Spiller.
Yes. Thank you. Next is a discussion about amending chapter code 327-34A6.
Discussion.
Councilman, let's start with Councilman Yacovelis.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think Council, you received a copy of the red line version of this ordinance with the changes proposed from Mrs. Stafford at 6:48 p.m. I would say either open that to reference, or if Mr. Fan or Mrs. Stafford would want me to, I can share my screen and share the document.
Unless otherwise, I think we've all received it. Is there anyone who hasn't received it?
I haven't received it, Mayor.
I'll resend it to you right now, Brian.
Yeah, I have Ira's email from 6:44. I don't have Peter, you sent it at 6:48?
Counselor, that's the same thing.
Oh, okay. All right, I have that.
Sent it out, myself and Mr. Stafford.
Okay.
So if I could just speak to this, Mayor?
Please, go ahead. Yep, please.
Thank you. So, look, we've all talked about this, and I think, many of us are very sympathetic to the ask, from the public that we not ticket people for parking at meters that are broken. I think, historically, while vandalism was an issue with certain meters and will remain an issue, I think, with certain meters, I think generally right now, the issue is that many of the meters are just simply not working. And we should amend our law so that we're not fining people for parking at a meter that's broken. Not everyone has access to a smartphone or applications like Park Mobile to be able to download, to be able to pay for parking digitally. I think we're heading in that direction as a country, as a civilization, but we're not there yet. And I think it's, just from even speaking to most of you, I've found that most of you agree philosophically. So I thought I'd introduce this tonight. To strike section 6 of 327-34, which is the portion of the parking meter law that says that if you park at a broken meter, you're ticketed, you're in violation. In addition, after speaking with Councilor Price Abrams and Councilor Russo, we also wanted to recommend striking the second portion of section B of the violation section, which says that if you violate any portion of this parking code, that you could face imprisonment in an Essex County jail for a period not to exceed 90 days, or by both such fine and imprisonment. So preserving the fine, because this applies to a much larger section of the code, not just parking at meters, but eliminating the jail time consequence. So This is what I'm proposing that we consider for discussion, and happy to answer any questions, and I'll likely make a motion at the end of our dialogue here.
Mayor?
Councilman Russo?
Yeah, I want to elaborate on that because the Civil Rights Commission have been asking us to not have these phrases continued, which I addressed, I believe, that it's in everything. It says you can get jail time. It's ridiculous. So this is a first chance to get rid of one of them, I guess. So I support that. I even think the fine is very high, but my main concern is that people do not get hurt and ticketed when the meter just does not work. And there's too many of them that do not work. I think that we need to do this even more so than the previous resolution, which was, giving people holiday 2-hour free parking. That would have maybe made this unnecessary for now, but I think the long range interest I have is that people are not going to be ticketed if the meter doesn't work. I find this continually frustrating. People complain to me all the time, and I've experienced it. My wife has. We've all experienced it. We did a great investment several years ago with Mayor Jackson on the previous council in trying to get better meters when they were really a problem. And these are more advanced than we ever had before. They did a good job for a number of years, but they seem to be breaking down for a variety of reasons. I just don't like our residents during this pandemic time and economic struggle, and the businesses to have people frustrated coming in saying, I can't get a meter, so I can't shop here. Imagine the impact on our businesses for not having customers come because of the meters not working. And there are many. You said most, Peter, but you withdrew the word most. I think it's getting to be most, unless somebody could tell me it's only 10%. I count more than a half everywhere I go. So I'm in favor of doing this for a variety of reasons, and certainly taking out the jail time reference, which is irrelevant. It's an old provision that was applied everywhere in all of our ordinances.
I have a question. This ordinance would be in perpetuity. There's not until something gets fixed or rectified, it would be forever. Is that what you said? I think.
Well, it's changing an ordinance, so it would be forever until an ordinance is changed. Right.
Okay. Okay. And in a case like this, unlike the holiday, the holiday limit, how would we measure the time of when people are parking?
Well, I mean, as the ordinance would be changed here, there would be no measuring of time in the sense of if the meter was broken, there would just be no ticketing. So there's no measuring, right? As I understand it.
For 5 hours? For
No, what would happen is
you'd have, like, you park there. If the same argument as before, if you're over there over 2 hours, there's that, but otherwise there's not something to measure in terms of time at the meter. And so you've got the 2-hour limit, but otherwise, if it's a broken meter, you'd be allowed to park.
essentially someone could park there until 2 in the morning, and then they would be run afoul of the overnight parking regulation. And they would have to move between 2 and 5 a.m. So,
otherwise you could park there all day.
yes, if this was adopted.
Okay.
Councilwoman Price Abrams.
So I guess maybe because those two things, have a way of jumbling in my memory here, the other ordinance and this one. We could say that at a broken meter, you still would have to move it after 2 hours. I mean, there could be a way, it's the same way you would mark any other parking space, no? Like, I don't know how we do it. We just spoke a few minutes ago about during the holidays, it's limited. We could insert a clause like that, just that someone wouldn't sit all day, the way Councilor Slager was sort of, alluding to. That could be something that we would add to it if it's going to have a provision like that removed. Someone shouldn't just be able to sit all day.
Anything is possible with our addition. Mr. Stafford noted, hard to enforce, but absolutely could be added. So, I mean, I'll just note on this, and I know I've had conversations, I think starting from the point of first and foremost, even like the previous one, I think every single person on here wants to address the parking meter issues. Absolutely, that's very important. In fact, I look forward to the conversation that is to happen at our upcoming Economic Development Committee meeting. I know that I've gotten a little preview of the work that Councilwoman Schlager, planned on bringing to that group, and certainly I'm sure still will. But with that, I can certainly say that all the data that I've seen, unfortunately, certainly, and I've reached out to our parking director, spoken with Mr. Stafford, and certainly he can speak for himself. But by eliminating any penalty for being at a broken meter, by all, not just theory, by all account of when that's been done in different towns, it's led to massive increases in vandalism. And then you end up with just an exacerbated problem as opposed to fixing the actual solution, which is our broken meters. I know that the councilwoman has had conversations with the parking utility and also Mr. Scantlebury to kind of look at solutions that address the actual problem, which is broken meters. And certainly, Councilwoman, I'd like to hear some of those pieces. I've heard little bits of others, but certainly before I'm comfortable voting for something like this, which I have a predisposition not to be, if it's going to lead to more broken meters, more cost, more challenges, and more frustration for residents, as opposed to if you've got solutions that solve the actual broken meter problem, I'd rather move in that direction. But what is it exactly that you've been hearing, Councilwoman, and we can go from there.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. So as many of you know, I've brought this subject up many weeks ago. And so since then until now, I've had some discussions with the parking utility and Mr. Scantlebury and Mr. Stafford somewhat as well. So what I've come to learn is that the kiosks that we have now in some of our lots are working very well. And in putting in additional kiosks in some of our surface lots, by the end of the month, just immediately, we would have 120 meter heads available that the parking authority would be able to use to swap out for some of the meters that are not working at this time. I've also come to learn that Mr. Scantlebury and the parking authority are looking at other meter companies, because it's a given that we have to perhaps look elsewhere in the immediate future that are less expensive meters and also that adapt to the latest technology. I've also, when we swap out some of these heads that we're able to acquire by doing some surface lots, in the next 5 weeks, when we have no parking, no metered parking money going on, we'd be able to make those swaps very easily, which I thought was a really good solution. But all of that, I would like to make a recommendation that since the lots in Upper Montclair Plaza, South Park Street, and the North Fullerton Deck, all of those lots that have kiosks and pay stations that take cash, credit cards, or you could use your app, that we think about converting all of our surface lots into kiosks and pay stations. If we did that, we would acquire 500 heads in total, which would give us an ample amount of heads to swap out as we go through the town in the streets that still have meters. So I would like to make that recommendation to do that, to go ahead and do the pay stations and kiosks that are known to be working. And also, more importantly, that it's been the experience of our parking authority. There has been minimal to no vandalism in those kiosks. They work really well. But in addition, I was thinking perhaps that as a pilot or a test, there are 42 parking spots in the circle in and around Watchung Plaza. So I was thinking, as we are looking to do these other things, that we do this pilot of a kiosk or multiple kiosks in and around the plaza to see how that works. We might not necessarily remove the poles in case we go back to meters, but I think doing a test in that critical area would be a good bellwether to see how it works, perhaps in other areas of town as well. So that's what I've come to learn. And I do agree that we have a problem, and that's why I went ahead and looked into this and had many conversations and emails with Mr. Scantlebury and our parking authority. So that's what I would like to make that recommendation for us to move ahead with pay stations and kiosks, especially in our surface lots.
Well,
Mr.
I know
Mayor, I do
Councilwoman
support
Stewart-
this. I didn't hear this before, but I do support Councilwoman Schlager's proposal. I would like, if you do a pilot, to not just do it at Watchung Plaza, but maybe South End also.
We could certainly look at
areas.
other places. And Councilwoman, I know, again, appreciate you giving the full details. I know you'd shared some of your conversations along the way, and I know I was, and I don't know if I have to anymore. Look forward to hearing them at EDC, but you presented them here. But I will say, you know, in separate conversations, I know that also some positive factors that are going on. I know with Mr. Phan's conversations with Verizon and looking at the parking utility, I know that Verizon has turned back on some of that 2G service provisions in the town that was providing some challenges as well. That should provide alleviation to some of the challenges that we're seeing, which is good news. But most importantly, I think what I'm hearing from you, Councilwoman, addresses the issue itself, which is actually having all these broken meters. When I hear things like 500, I wrote that number down when you said 500 extra heads to be able to work with. You know, also going to a system that, as you noted, has had minimum vandalism in terms of the pay stations, which makes sense. I think people are used to those, especially in lots and other spots. You know, we hear from Council Russo and certainly you of trials in some other areas. You know, this is the kind of solution. I'm glad, you know, Councilwoman, you're looking at it, because I do still go back to, while we all want to address the issue itself, I think providing something policy that creates more vandalism and quite frankly exacerbates the problem is not the solution. Let's solve the problem for people. Let's give them working meters. And I think if we can do that in pretty short order, and I heard some of your timelines listed there, Councilwoman Schlager, and certainly through EDC, we can, flesh that out with the parking utility. I'd love to, specifically hear all those pieces. But to me, that's the direction I'd rather go. Councilman Jacobellis, you asked about a discussion here and then move forward. I wouldn't be supportive of moving forward with a policy that I think is going to exacerbate the problem, but I certainly like what I heard from Councilman Schlager, and maybe I'd ask, to the township manager, does something like this require, do you need motions from us to adopt her recommendations, Mr. Stafford? Is this something that you're hearing her direction? I think she's got some good ideas. You've obviously had some conversations with her about it. Is this something that you could move forward with if you saw like a straw poll of us in agreement? Is this something you could move on, or does this require council action? We need to debate and discuss this and vote on something like this.
No straw poll is necessary. No legislation is necessary. It's an operational issue.
Okay.
I do want to add that I like Mr. Russo's idea of potentially adding the South End. I've had several business owners, particularly on Orange Road, have some issues like every other area. So Bob, thank you for thinking of that. And if that's possible, if it's not too much trouble for you, Mr. Stafford, I'm listening to both. And Robin, kudos to you for this. And I'm glad that this is something that potentially could go to EDC, which is what I thought we originally had agreed upon in our previous discussion. So, but I just want to throw that in, Mr. Stafford. If you think that could be added, I'd appreciate that.
I have no reason to think, sir, that it couldn't be included efficiently. Though Mr. Scantlebury has certainly briefed me and kept me in the loop, as he does on all matters. He is the lead in my office on this, and I'm sure he'll convey this to Mr. Germano and Mr. Abzarni promptly so that it can be included.
And I would like to add one thing, excuse me, that the initial lots have been identified that we're going to swap out for the kiosks, and they're going to be the Grove Street lot, which is behind Grove Pharmacy, between Oxford and Walnut, Valley Road across from the police station, and Maple Place, which is between Bloomfield Avenue and Portland Place. Those are going to be the first three that are swapped out for pay stations. Those three lots gives us between 80 and 120 heads that can possibly be replacing faulty meters. So we're looking to start that like ASAP.
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Thank you.
Councilwoman, that's the numbers you started with, I assume, right?
Yeah.
Councilwoman Flager, the first,
Yeah,
okay.
but
I
he
have-
mentioned the lots, which were on my notes, but thank you, Mr. Scaz, perfect.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
I see
No,
hands.
it's
I have,
good. Thank you.
I have Councilman Price Abrams and Councilman Yacobellis. Saw two hands go up. So Councilman Price Abrams and then Councilman Yacobellis. Go ahead.
Thanks, and I'm glad to know there is a solution, in mind and at hand, and, in the space of what we don't know, this was a conversation I'm glad we're having here. Could I get clarification just what the kiosk? So I know what it's like to pull into the Crescent deck. That's that. What are we talking about? Do you have to put the ticket back in your car window? Is that kind, or?
No, what's being contemplated, and certainly Mr. Scantlebury can speak further to what I'm about to say if necessary. What's being contemplated is what's similar to being done in the Upper Montclair lot.
So just describe that, if you don't mind. I'm trying to think of what the kiosk does. What do you punch your number in of the space that you're parked in, right? That's that.
At present, yes, or there's also a possibility down the pike when technology allows for the entry of a license plate number in.
Right. Okay.
To that point, Councilman Price Abrams, as you know, well, I don't know if you know actually, so we've had conversations in the past about switching even our parking utility to license plate readers technology, which is out there right now. It's been a budgetary piece, but they could sweep and just do license plate reading. And therefore they would not have to know a space number or anything else. And it's very fast and efficient as well. We currently do that with police. They have that, but as per security measures, they're not allowed to communicate that with the parking utility. We've had these conversations, I think might have been prior to you, my previous council, around kind of integrating systems, but we couldn't do that by law. But eventually budgetarily, getting a system where they could just scan, and then it's easier and more efficient on that front as well. So I would argue we'd hear about on EDC technology, make sure they could adapt to that technology as needed. Councilman Yacobellis.
Thanks, Mayor. Hey, good job. I'm sure I know how hard it was to, leave this out of the conversation that we had earlier today, Robin, about parking and what we were going to talk about tonight. And it's great that we referenced that it's on the EDC. It was going to be in the EDC meeting, and I look at the agenda for the EDC meeting, and it's not even included there. So great job with cultivating this behind the scenes and not including me in the very frank discussions that we've had about this issue. So that'll be what it is. And we wonder why we have strained relations on this council. So all well and good. Everything that was said sounds great. It needs to be extended and include sidewalk and metered parking on the streets, not just the surface lots. And it skirts the fundamental issue here, which is, in principle, if a meter is broken, should we be fining somebody for parking at that meter? Doesn't matter if there's 1 meter broken in town or 400 meters broken in town. Should we be fining somebody if they're parking at a broken meter? Doesn't matter whose fault it is that the meter is broken. It's a philosophical, fundamental question. That's what this ordinance change would propose. And for violating any of these laws for parking at meters, should we be sending somebody to jail over that? So those are the changes that are proposed for this ordinance. I still think we should be moving forward with those changes, even if 99% of meters are working in Montclair. For the 1% that aren't, if we ever got to that point, I don't think, and I think most of you agree, that we should be fining somebody for parking at that broken meter. 5 of you have verbally said that to me in the last week. So I am going to be, just attempting to move these changes forward. I think it's not an or, I think it's an and. I think it's everything that was just discussed, which is great and should happen. And this piece as well. We should not be fining people for parking at a meter. So I appreciate that we addressed and came up with all these creative solutions, and we're going to pursue these things, but it ignores the fundamental issue in question here. Should we be fining people for parking at a broken meter? That's the question that we need to answer, and that changing this ordinance would address. And should people go to jail if they violate the parking meter ordinance?
So I just want to say,
Okay.
I really appreciated you defending Councilman Hurlock when the caller mentioned his affiliation as being a Republican. So in the same vein, I think I didn't know anything about your ordinance until today. So to say that you were kept in the dark on something is a little disingenuous, because it's the same thing that occurred with others, meaning particularly me. And I say that to say that just because it seems that someone else did something and didn't get your approval, doesn't mean it's not good policy. And just because they brought it up at a time, like, as quite honestly, it came to me, and I think there is a concern about folks being charged for parking and a meter is broken. I think your point about bringing up the fact that people may be charged $500 or threatened to go to jail are things that are worth discussing. But I want to go back to the fact that, again, it may not be on the EDC agenda, but it was clearly stated that this was something that was coming through EDC. But more important, when you say, fractured council, again, these are conversations that should be held amongst ourselves. And to Counselor, like Counselor Russo brought up something that he felt was an improvement off of the suggestion you had for November 1. And he never discussed that with me. So I think, to act as if these conversations don't happen quite often, I think it's just, like I said, a little disingenuous. And I just want to be on the record as saying that I personally did not hear anything about this until today. There have been discussions, obviously, with others. So maybe, I could be kept in the dark as far as you're concerned, but others don't. So when you say 5 other counselors, okay, there's 7 others. And I think there's a time when, there's some things where I may have some concerns, and I come to you, Peter, and I make a suggestion to you, hey, you may want to have this conversation with someone. And I just ask that you have the same for me if you're going to publicly try to call people out on this forum, because it's really to the point now where we're having a legitimate conversation and discussion. Councilman Schlager, who's been on this item for a while, has brought forth some things. The mayor has added some things, and the manager has made it clear that this is something he feels that we can do. So I think we need to leave the personal out, because that can be done direct one-to-one, as opposed to in a forum where we are responsible for working together, and at least the appearance in this meeting that we're trying, which I think we are trying to add something that you, quite frankly, have brought up. And now that it may be a little bit different, there's no reason to try to chide others for doing work. So, but I just want to say that, if you're going to applaud or you're going to come to defense of somebody, which you did, I just want to make sure I come to defense to Councilor Schlager, because I think the comment that you made about her basically doing something in the dark was inappropriate.
Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things real quick too. I thank you, Councilwoman Schlager, for the work that you've done on this issue. It sounds like quite a bit, actually. And a couple of things I just want to keep in mind and I wasn't aware of. Mr. Mayor, you had made the point about the increased vandalism if we were to pass something, as we discussed this evening, with regards to broken meters. I was not aware of that. I'd like to learn more about that, and perhaps that can be one of the discussion points at the EDC meeting that you and Mr. Jacobellis and Ms. Schlager will have. A couple of things too, and I actually support Councilor Jacobellis's move to take the jail time out. Quite frankly, this is one of the reasons I didn't vote for the leaf blower ordinance back in February. For that very reason. So I'd like to have that part considered going forward if we can. I think there's definitely that's something we should look at across the board, quite frankly. And as Mr. Jacobello said, that's a first step in going forward when we're looking at these types of ordinances too. I also would just keep in mind, for those residents that are technologically challenged, such as myself, I'm still popping quarters, just, in dimes, depending how long I'm going to be. So when we're talking about pay stations and, Park Mobile and cell phones, keep in mind that there's a lot of us out there that don't necessarily myself included, have that ability to do that technological stuff. And I hear about it from constituents all the time. So just that we're flexible in the way that, and I think Councilwoman Schlager, you had mentioned the possibility of paying by credit card or cash in some of these instances as well. I would just stress that we try to keep that open as much as possible, because I know that's an issue for many of us, quite frankly. So thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and I'll certainly say this, and we could do it two different ways. I know the conversation around the penalty around jail time was addressed with the previous ordinance, where it was noted by the township attorney that to his knowledge, we'd never, ever implemented something like that, but we could address it. I don't think it would be unanimous here to eliminate that provision. I will go out on a big limb and say, so that is not, an item of contention at all as the discussion point. We can certainly move that forward if everyone so desires, or we could have Mr. Karasik review all of our ordinances and see where it's deemed appropriate to remove them. And we take one swift item instead of piecemealing. We happen to find an ordinance we're working on and pull that out. There may be some more egregious offenses. I don't even know, right, that Mr. Karasik may recommend we leave it in for. I don't even want to, guess on that. But we could do it either way. So I don't think there's any objection. As we noted last time, this isn't something that's ever happened here. But if we want to pull that out, I don't have a problem with that piece. I think the real fundamental debates around the parking piece specifically here. But with that, I know Councilwoman Schlager, you wanted to speak as well.
Actually, before Mr. Mayor, if I could just address your point. Forgive me, Councilwoman Schlager. Real quick, forgive me again, I get banged up on this all the time in public comment about being a lawyer. But as a lawyer, it's never a good excuse that we've never used the statute or the ordinance before, because it's always available to be used at some point. So I'm very sensitive to that as well. I think it's a fair point. And again, obviously, there's going to be times when it does need to be, reading through some of the ordinances here on my iPad as we're speaking. Obviously, vandalism, which is related to much of what we're talking about here with people breaking meters and stuffing coins in, what have you, that should have some kind of jail time or penalty. So I leave it up to the good offices of Mr. Karasik to decide when and where and how we address that. But I do think it's something that we should address. And again, it's something I brought up back in February with the leaf blower ordinance, which is one of the reasons I didn't support it. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Schlager.
Just to be straw poll on this, I think let's, without objection, we'll have Mr. Karasik review all of those and propose when we should remove it, where his recommendations, and do it in one fell swoop. Unless someone says no, they want to look at them one by one. Let's have him make a recommendation and we do it all at once. Is there objection to that path?
And Mr. Mayor, if I could just say one thing, just
Mr.
the way the
Karasik,
codification works.
Let me hold you off. Nope. Councilman Schlager's been waiting, and let's have.
I apologize for
Councilman Schlager.
Thank you. Thank you. I just have something to say and a couple of things. One, this was a discussion item that we received at 6:44. I received at 6:44 this evening. And I also want to say that my many discussions with Mr. Scantlebury and the Parking Authority were over the last week or so, and the recommendations that I made, I received late this afternoon. So I apologize if I didn't have a chance to discuss it with many other people at that time. But I do have, I have a job, I have a family, and I can't always be on top of everything, to have every discussion with everybody. And I'm very insulted by what Mr. Iacobello said to me.
Mr. Stafford.
I feel obliged to say, particularly Councilor Schlager, I received the email from Mr. Iacobello. I believe it was this morning at approximately 10:30. The press of business and being forced to deal with emergent issues all day precluded me from dealing with it until I want to say about 5 o'clock. I attempted to send an email at 5:05, I believe, which I believe contained that ordinance. And I did not realize until 6:48 that the 5 o'clock email did not take it. So the difference between, or the fact that it went out at 6:48 this evening, that's on me, as I tried to convey in an email. I did try to send it at 5 o'clock, which still is late, but just know that email should have gone out at 5 o'clock.
Well, and let me note, as chair of these meetings, and do have the one piece, which is the agenda on this, I will note that the reason, we literally have items for discussion is to discuss them. So I appreciate it. As you note there, Mr. Stafford, an item is added, okay, this morning, or you get to it this afternoon. I don't think anyone heard anyone chide anyone about that. That's a discussion item. Councilwoman Schlager, as it seemed very germane to this, and I'd got an inkling that she had heard some pieces she wanted to discuss and would be germane. She is more than welcome to have a discussion about it right here. That is literally the purpose of discussion. We can decide if we want to move something. Councilman Ecklos, you actually noted you wanted to move it right after our discussion. So, there is discussion. We try to honor that by doing discussions on pieces and usually giving a little time. But there is absolutely nothing inappropriate about that. We have talked about proclamations being on prior for people to see it. This body can certainly decide if they want the same kind of requirement around a timeline of when things can be added, even for discussion. That's a separate discussion item anyone wants to have. But let's be clear, discussion items are to be added for discussion at any time. And by the way, anyone can do that with or without talking to anyone else at any time they want. So just to be clear on that. With that, we've had some discussion around this item. Specifically, we've had, I think, additional information from the Councilwoman, and I think certainly this doesn't have to be a whatever. I don't even know how to describe there. I think, kudos to everybody here for trying to address an issue that we're all hearing about. That's the goal. That's the focus. We may have fundamental disagreements. Councilman Jacobs, I disagree with you about, making it, even if it's 1%, to make it without any penalty for parking there, because, and again, we will get this in EDC. I know I have reached out to Mr. Stafford and the parking utility, and they say it increases greatly the number of meters that are vandalized. So I have a problem with that. That's the debate, that's the discussion, but we can have that for sure. But I think we've got a real solution here, and what I've heard from Councilwoman Schlager, which I know is everyone's goal, to solve the issue of our broken meters. I like what I've heard. I think others do. I heard other pieces that I like as well from Councilman Russo, to expand it to other areas to try out. I think that's a great suggestion. I've heard the recommendation from our deputy mayor to keep collecting those coins and other pieces as much as possible. I didn't hear anything otherwise in the Councilwoman Schlager's proposal, even in the stations. So that's great. And I think that's where we all want to be. So, all in all, at the end of the day, I think it gets us to a place where I think we're all trying to go. That said, this was just discussion items here. I've also asked, and it came up as part of discussion for our township attorney. I asked for any objection. I did not hear any, to review all of our ordinances to see where there's this penalty of jail time, to see where appropriately it should be removed from all of our ordinances. That is appropriate. And certainly there may be some discussion around a few of them that we all might want to discuss and see if we agree. He has noted that, and I think has agreed, and will provide that to us all, and we can all look at that and see if we've got any other pieces, and go from there in our recommendations. I'll probably put that to the Public Safety Committee when he has that recommendation. That's their charge, to look at that and see if they have any tweaks to that, or want to move it and adopt it as whole. But again, I think positive in terms of the role that we play in getting to a place that addresses the issues that we have before us. That was the item for discussion. I appreciate it being added. Appreciate everyone's insights and comments on it. It was discussion. Is there anything else before we move forward? Councilwoman Price Abrams, then Councilman Russo.
I believe that Mr. Karasik wanted to comment further, and before we moved on and whatever, I just wanted to hear what it is he had to add to that conversation piece about the statutes. Was it, Mr. Karasik, or?
I was just going to say that because there was a discussion about the best way to go about it. I think it's better to do an omnibus ordinance which addresses a whole list of these jail times, because rather than piecemeal, partially because the way the codification company works, it'll be a lot easier for them to change the code accordingly. And also, as far as we're concerned, passing all these ordinances and having public hearings on each one separately can be quite tedious for the council. So we should do one big omnibus ordinance, and I will get to it quickly.
Thank you. And if I could just then finish in a wrap. I mean, I know Councilor Russo, I believe earlier, referenced the Civil Rights Commission, and this has been since the leaf blower thing, and I'm not quite following, I think, something that the deputy mayor was saying about it, but that was a piece that where it was really brought to my attention, perhaps that of some others, that we have these embedded, and it's the feeling strongly of many members of the Civil Rights Commission that while it's not generally, or maybe never has been enforced, it's the fear and concern that it would be enforced unevenly, and I'm not accusing anybody of that. I'm just saying that is a concern that has been cited by many members of the Civil Rights Commission. You know, black and brown people, whatever. I mean, people who just, not necessarily in this town, but as a general matter, that is part of the social context for provisions that are never enforced except for when they are. And then, anyway, I think it's very appropriate that we would do the review that's discussed, and I appreciate that that's an undertaking that is gonna take place, and I thank you.
Right, I should just say one quick thing, which is that these provisions in our ordinances all came from state law. There's a state provision which talks about what the maximum penalties municipalities can pose on ordinances. And that's where it wasn't as if someone sat around here and decided
Oh, yeah.
to put jail time in. That doesn't mean we shouldn't change them. The law doesn't require them to be there. But that's where they derived from.
I don't think anyone's being critical of you there, Ira. We're just trying to change it. So, but noted. Okay. Yeah, I had Councilman Russo, and then so we'll go to the next Councilman Iacobello. So Councilman Russo, and then Councilman Iacobello.
Yeah, I just want to say that, you know, it doesn't matter to me. I don't like when I get something last minute or surprised, or, you know, you get hit from the side. I don't like that. I've been through that 22 years sometimes. But even if an idea just comes up now, that's good, which is what Councilor Schlager just brought up, something that I never thought of. And of course, I added to it saying expand it to South End. We're all working together, you know, and trying to get things done. Now, I'm still supportive of changing the ordinance to not penalize people. I still support that. I wanted to do an extension of our holiday shopping, you know, discount, the 2 hours, maybe just not as much as Councilor Iacobello suggested. But the majority rules and majority voted that down. And then we are, you know, now coming up with another idea that might be good. But I still want to say that we should work together and not criticize each other and try to be helpful in solving these problems for the citizens. It's got to be a solution, and there is a crisis that we need to address. So I hope we're going to look at this from a broad perspective, that we all work together and try to get something good done, even if it comes up the last minute. Because I got this thing, you know, 10 to 7 tonight. Something came in, the manager explained that it wasn't able to send it earlier. So that's just a problem that occurred, but it doesn't mean the idea is not good. You know, it doesn't mean the idea is not good because we get it at the end. Let's hope that's what the national Washington people do. Even if it's the last minute, they get a good idea and to pass it. Thanks, Mayor.
You bet, sir. And I think we're all, you know, coming to that point here. And obviously, we're all passionate about different pieces, but, you know, let's see here. So Councilman Iacobello.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, and to Bob's point, you know, this is, you know, again, it's, and you made this point, this is discussion tonight. We're not asking to vote to change the law. At most, we'd be voting to put it on the agenda for a first reading on November 1st. And then if that were successful, then a public hearing and a second reading on November 15th. And then unless you accompanied that with an emergency resolution, it would still be another 20 days to go into effect. So that would be going into December before the changes would go into effect. So there's no rushing here. None of this is about rushing anything. None of this is about surprising. I've had conversations with 6 of you, well, 5 of you, I make 6, about this. Councilor Cummings, I did not talk to you about this. Fair criticism. But for the rest of you, and Mayor, I know very clearly your position, but the others, at least to my face, agreed with me on this change. Not the jail time piece, because that, frankly, I did not bring that up with everybody, but I had a conversation with every other person, and every other person agreed that we should not be fining people for parking at a broken meter. Everything that we're talking about doing needs to happen. I don't think anybody disagrees that we need to make these changes to improve parking infrastructure, how we give people the opportunity to pay for parking, capacity, all of those things. But these things all take time. Even the review of the penalty that Ira's going to do is going to take time. And we have an acute crisis right now. Even if we were to move this forward for discussion, for first reading and second reading on that date, that timeline I just articulated, tomorrow, the next day, the day after that, we have hundreds of meters that aren't working in Montclair right now. And we are ticketing people for parking at those meters who do not have access to a smartphone and do not have access to the Park mobile app. I think it's completely reasonable for us to start the process of whether we should amend the law or not to remove that. And unless minds have changed, and one thing was said to me in person that's different from how you feel now, or maybe the thinking has been evolved because new information has been received. I came into tonight understanding that at least 5 of us felt philosophically that the township should not be fining people for parking in a broken meter. This is a really, 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 I mean, you see it, you have it in front of you. It's crossing out 2 lines of text and a 3rd line in the violation section. This is not a huge undertaking. It's not a huge lift. So I think regardless of all the other stuff, which is great and needs to happen, it's different from this. So I raised this tonight to have the discussion. I intended to move to have this be, scheduled for on the November 1st agenda for a first reading formally, based on most of us saying that we felt strongly that people should not be fined for parking at a broken meter. So that's where I came into this tonight. I still feel strongly that we should make those changes. I don't accept, and in fact, most of you again repeated back to me that you also don't accept this notion that waiving this creates increased vandalism. It may in some cases, but most meters that are not working in Montclair right now have nothing to do with vandalism. It has to do with batteries, and has to do with solar panels, it has to do with parts being broken. So it's conflating, I think, additional things. So whether this is successful or not is fine, but I would like to move to introduce these changes for November 1st, first reading.
Okay, Councilman Jacobellis would like to move that. Is there a second? Okay. So we also have the recommendations that I think, Mr. Stafford, you said you can move on, forthwith with those pieces from Councilwoman Schlager. We would certainly all appreciate you do that as soon as possible to get that done. We all want to see this rapidly addressed very quickly. I think that's an important piece. Talking with our parking utility, I know that upwards of about 50% are with vandalism right now. So hopefully we get these extra meters on, we can address those pieces, and also the functionality around 2G, hopefully getting addressed. Thank you, Mr. Fan, for Verizon conversations there. And also certainly, as we move forward, with some of those other suggestions, I think it should rapidly alleviate the situation, which is our goal. So thank you. Mr. Karasik, you talked about getting a global bill together. Let's all get that, review that. I would, without objection, send that to public safety to review it and get that back to us in a timely manner as well. All right, with that, we do not have any other items for discussion. And I believe, Mr. Stafford, you noted that the executive session item is delayed and will not be tonight. Is that correct, sir?
Correct.
Okay, thank you with that, sir. So moving forward, I will go around. Mr. Stafford, any additional comments from you?
I don't have anything else tonight, Mayor. Thank you, though.
Okay, Mr. Deputy Manager?
Nothing, Mayor.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. The early voting period for the general election will begin this Saturday, and it ends on the 31st of October. There are 10 sites available to Essex County residents. 2 nearest sites to Montclair, the Watsessing Park Community Center in Bloomfield, and the Cedar Grove Park Community Center. At these sites, voters will use for the first time an electronic poll pad that replaces the traditional poll book where you sign your name at check-in. For this reason, voters are encouraged to bring their sample ballots because there's a barcode there, and the poll pad will scan the ballot, expediting your check-in process. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Township Attorney? You're muted, sir. Mr. Krasik? Is anyone else hearing Mr. Krasik?
No.
Oh, here I am. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. My mouse went astray. I'm sorry, I didn't hear exactly. Were you asking me for comments?
Yes.
No, I don't have any comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I'm sorry. I had a little.
Yep, no problem. I'm sorry, Mr. Deputy Manager, did I go to you yet? Okay, all right,
Yes,
sorry
you
about that. Thank you. Okay, can't remember the order of things last time, so let's go with, let's go Councilman Russo today.
Thank you, Mayor. I always have something to say. I just want to thank the AAPI folks for putting together, AAPI Montclair, for putting together the wonderful Diwali Festival. Last May, we had a great Lantern Festival, which they put together. I want to particularly thank the student from Montclair High School who we put on our Civil Rights Commission, and she's the head of the Robotics Club, Serena Lee, for all her efforts. We took a lot of pictures together with Mayor, your wonderful wife, Lauren, and your child, and Lori Price Abrams was there. I think Robin also, and Peter, and we all got together with also the assemblyman from Jersey City was there, Raj Mukherjee, who made a great speech. We want to try to fight, very, very bad attitudes that people have developed because of, and I always say why it goes back to the former president, but anti-Asian hate is a big problem. But this positive event, the Diwali Festival, was attended by the mayor's wife, myself, other council members, and we really enjoyed supporting that effort and had a great time. I think it was Saturday at the Montclair Art Museum. I also want to just remind everybody that Halloween is coming, and I wore my tie with lots of pumpkins on it, which I think everybody sees every year. Pumpkin that's smiling is smiling that Montclair is going to survive this pandemic, and we're going to survive all the conflicts. And I just want to ask everybody to work together again. I'm trying to do this in a nonpartisan way. If more people were like Bill Herlock in the other party, I say we wouldn't have the problems we're having. But watch Washington. Watch Washington. There's millions of dollars that could be coming to residents of Montclair to help them with all the different costs and struggles. Seniors with the need for dental and eye and hearing aid. I can't believe Medicare never covered it, but these are the things that people like Bernie Sanders and the president are fighting for. I just hope that the other senators that need to get together behind this can do this. It's once in a lifetime. I guess I talk this way because I'm getting old. I'll be 74 next week. We need to do things that are going to help people in their daily lives. We struggle with all these bureaucratic issues in Montclair. We didn't decide to suspend fines, but I think if our management and our police could relax enforcement a little bit, when people keep complaining about meters, maybe we just do an administrative relaxation of enforcement. That's what I would like to see. So, Mayor, I'm just saying that everybody should work together. Look at your ballot, vote for good people that represent Montclair, and try to be helpful, whatever party you're in, try to be helpful to your fellow residents of Montclair. It's a unique town. It's a wonderful town. It's a fragile town. We've got to work together and not conflict with each other over some issues that are really not as important as our overall national voting rights and our overall national, tenor. I think that our country's coming apart in some ways, but Montclair could be a model and example for coming together. Audrey Fletcher, who's a long time ago councilwoman who I've started serving with Brian Scantlebury, used to say, wherever the country is going, Montclair will get there first. And she was paraphrasing something that Mayor Gibson used to say, that wherever the U.S. is going, Newark will get there first. But Audrey used to talk about Montclair being a leader. She was a great Fourth Ward councilwoman who I first served with. She taught me a lot. And I keep thinking what she said, that Montclair can be the model, not perfect, we're not great in every way, but we've got the history, traditions of doing things that are good for everybody. And I'd like to see everybody work together. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Yacobalis.
Thanks, Mayor. I also attended the Diwali Festival, which was great, at the Montclair Art Museum, and another one at the brewery as well. And it's been really, I think, wonderful to just see AAPI come to life in the last year. Of course, something born out of tragedy, just in terms of the way that community has been marginalized and talked about over the last few years. But something beautiful has come out of it. You know, light up Montclair. Many of us, I think, were at the Lantern Festival, and now they had this beautiful event at the Montclair Art Museum, and that was great. Also had the privilege and pleasure of attending the firefighters' ball on Friday night with Deputy Mayor Herlock and Councilor Schlager, where we got to show our appreciation for the 16 firefighters that have retired or will be retiring this year, or over the last 2 years, I believe. And in particular, Lieutenant Imelda Mensch. I just want to mention, just meeting her was a privilege. She's the first female firefighter in Montclair's history and the first female firefighter officer in Montclair's history. And she is retiring this year. And so she was honored that night. And so it was a real privilege to meet her and to just be part of that history. I want to highlight that this is, we're in the middle of National Friends of the Library Week. So I want to, just encourage Montclairians of all stripes to go to montclairlibrary.org, check out the services, check out the events of our awesome public library system. Definitely utilize the services that are entitled to you as a citizen. I think it's really, really important. Also want to highlight that, as the clerk mentioned, early voting starts this Saturday. So it's the first time, it's the first year that early voting is in place in New Jersey. Pretty cool, 2 full weekends and an additional full week to vote. So anybody who has, challenges juggling work schedules or commutes, if you're commuting, or childcare and can't get to the polls on election day, you've got so many other opportunities. Unfortunately, there are no sites in Montclair, but there are several in bordering towns to Montclair. I highlighted that on my blog today, actually, about early voting. So you can check that out. And I just want to really encourage people to vote. I think it's really, really important. We have the gubernatorial race, choosing governor, obviously, with the lieutenant governor choosing all of our state elected officials, and then answering the question of whether Montclair should continue to have an appointed Board of Education or whether it should have an elected Board of Education. Other than that, I'm disappointed that we didn't take any action tonight to create some relief for people, just in terms of parking meters in town. I still think, and I will just reiterate, everything that was discussed in terms of solutions are great and need to happen. And I, of course, as part of EDC, I've been a part of many of those conversations and creating and coming up with a lot of those ideas. And we've got a lot of great examples from other municipalities in New Jersey and around the country in terms of all kinds of different technology that's out there. But we did not take action tonight, and I'm really sad that we did not take action tonight to at least advance the conversation on whether or not we should be fining people for parking at broken meters when hundreds of meters are currently broken in Montclair. So tomorrow and every other day, until these bigger solutions come into play, which I recognize could be sooner than later, but until they do, we continue to have a broken system, and we did not take action when we could have, and I find that incredibly disappointing. So, thank you.
Well, I'll certainly move on, but Councilman, I will not let you characterize it that this body did not take action. I heard Councilwoman Schlager propose a number of ideas. We asked the township manager if he can move forward with those without our vote. He did say yes. Mr. Deputy Manager, you can speak to how soon some of those actions may be starting to take place. Mr. Scantlebury, how soon can some of these things start?
I'm going to be meeting with Mr. Germano in the morning, and we're going to move on them forthwith.
Do we have any idea of how quickly some of these lots are converted to?
I have to speak with him, but I believe that we can move on. That could be done quickly, very quickly.
Okay, thank you. So again, we
have
can
that conversation first with him.
Yes, Councilman, we can all disagree on the different pieces here. This is a representative vote democracy here, but I think all of us want to take action, and I think that's evidenced by the actions that this council did take to move forward with those recommendations. We are moving forward with those. We are taking action to alleviate the challenges. And again, I'll just note, we can't be like the national level. Just because it's not our idea does not mean it's a bad idea. I think Councilman Schlager's got a lot of good ideas that she moved forward. I think a lot of us are supportive of those ideas. We think they'll lead to real effective outcomes in terms of this problem, and we're supportive of such. So, I think we need to characterize it in, yes, our opinions, but also note that action is still action being taken. Moving on to Mr. Cummings, let's go for.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not much. All I want to do is make sure that I announce this is going to be a panel discussion that Montclair Local is having on Thursday night. I think a lot of people would chime in to hear what they have to say. It's, of course, about the elected board versus appointed board. It should be a robust discussion, and I think it's very important that people hear about something that has a very big impact on our town. To follow that up, I'm having a fourth ward meeting on Monday evening, which will consist of a panel on the same topic. And for my panel, what I've got is I've got Joanna Wright, who's on the Montclair local panel, educator from South Orange Maplewood, but she can present and talk about what it's like to be on an elected board and also running for those positions. And she's very dynamic and very passionate, so I think she can bring a good perspective, as well as Eric D'Amato from Vote Montclair, who will be able to make the case for those who are interested in the elected board side. And I'm very happy to have Dan Gill, longtime educator who knows the history of this town, to be able to present his thoughts on this decision. And finally, something that's very important, because something in this discussion that I think has been lost, is having Mr. Benecke represent the factual nature of all of what this means in terms of the budget, financing. You know, he's worked with type 1 and type 2 districts. He's well versed in the law. And I think it's important that that perspective is allowed as well. And to clear it up, Reverend Craig Dunn has offered to be a moderator. Craig is very well versed in national education issues from the times when he worked at the New York Times and getting the paper, you know, around the country with schools and institutions. So I think this panel will be very balanced, objective, but also very informative. And although, you know, I'm personally stepping aside from this, other than providing an update, because I think it's important that people have the chance to hear from experts and hear from people who have a point of view that can touch all points. It will be Monday evening at Glenfield School at 7 p.m. There will be social distancing, so folks can come in person. There will also be a link that people can call in or each send in messages through the chat and also participate via online. So it'll be a virtual way that those can remain at home and view it, but also participate. Reached out to the school district. We will be following social distancing. Masks will be required. So it will be an environment that I think is as safe as possible, but one that I hope is engaging as we have a conversation on a topic that is very important. And I'll find out, I'm talking about the library. I had a great opportunity to do my first Little Big Read. It was a lot of fun. Got to talk to students at Nishawayne and Bullock. And it was, you know, I did my typical thing. I engaged the students, made it very interactive. But I will say that that was, you know, we get to do a lot of things in council. That was probably up to this point, one of the most enjoyable experiences I've had. So that is all I have to say tonight. And I look forward to hopefully people tuning in to the Montclair local discussion and also to the discussion on Monday. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. And that little read, that's a big seat, is it not? Trying to get out of that thing there. So fun times for sure. Let's move to Councilwoman Price Abrams.
Thanks, Mayor. A few things. So first, my technology seemed to fail in the very beginning. So I apologize to the public listening and to you colleagues that I missed some of it. And I'm going to go back and listen to what I missed, but my computer went out, which was very unusual. That said, just to echo a little bit of what others said and a few other things, the Diwali Festival was really just a delightful thing. It's sort of up from nothing. So much has been birthed in this town, and it was a draw to people from many other places. There were vendors with, you know, ethnic and different kinds of ways of celebrating Diwali. So very nice to be there and to be with others in that moment. Skipping around a little bit to the clerk and to the public. I took note that on my ballot, my sample ballot, I'm actually at a different polling location. So not for the early voting, which are totally separate locations, but even my regular ones. I would just encourage members of the public to note on yours whether you are in the location you have previously been, because I have previously been at the firehouse, and this year I'm at Nishawane School. So a point on that, and of course, all the get out the vote efforts, so critically important, which of course itself ties back to a topic others have already referenced with regard to the public questions. There are, I will say, 3 public questions. One is our local question about which we've done some speaking, but I'm less familiar with the one on college wagering on sports. But I will tell you the public question number 2 is a matter on which I worked when I was a member of the board of the Center for Nonprofits for a very long time. There's a quirk in our state constitution, which is why the amendment is here for the public, that doesn't allow those smaller organizations, the nonprofit organizations that fuel our communities throughout the state, unless you are either a veterans group or a seniors group, which have both become exempted from this provision, you may not use the proceeds of games of chance. If you happen to have a bingo hall or a lottery of some sort, you may not use those proceeds for like your operating. And as we know, our nonprofits are really so, they're of different levels of capacity, but many of them, struggle to get by and it's very indiscriminate why they should not be able to use those proceeds in any way they see fit within, of course, appropriate legal means. So it's very important, and I encourage folks to read into it a little bit. I'm sure if you went to the site of the Center for Nonprofits, they will have information on there if you wanted to learn more about it. And it'll have a really big, helpful impact to those organizations and to those of us who benefit from them. The third, question, which is our local question, I just do encourage folks to really study it. There are the 2 forums that Councilor Cummings mentioned. There's a 3rd forum that the CGI high school students are putting on, and leave it to Councilor Hurlock, Deputy Mayor, to say more. I believe he's been invited. And maybe Councilor Russo as well. So those, I don't know who's participating, but I do want us to just amplify, as others have, that participating one way or the other, educate yourself, consider the various impacts of that, which will be significant for our town either way. In terms of, just a little free associating here, but the film festival is coming up. So we've been invited to help cut the ribbon at the Claridge Theater, where some of those films will be shown going forward. The Montclair Film Festival as an organization has made great inroads to use that space in new and creative ways. So hope folks will take advantage of the opportunity to, find one or find a bunch of films to delight you during the festival. We're still, some of us, debriefing on the jazz festival that happened. I mean, there's just so much rich culture and enthusiastic excitement about things we can do in this town. And, I really love the ways that people roll up their sleeves and figure out what's important to them and make it happen. And we as a council can help in the ways that we can. And then just speaking to some of the dynamic of the deep breath I felt like I needed at the end of this meeting, I want to just make a case for the potential of getting back. And I say back, I've never been, apart from the very first day we were all sworn in together, sitting at the dais with everybody, that we would all show up for a council meeting together. And I think it is time to figure out if protocols can be put into place with people's vaccinations, booster shots, screening people at the door if they have a vaccine, card or not, that we will have more opportunity as members of this body to interact if we are coming together for those meetings, that we have the time before and after meetings to socialize as humans, to socialize on ideas that we want to discuss. And I really think that is something that's lacking, and that has not helped. It has not helped us that we've forged this council in the era of COVID. It's just one of the things that's been affected among so many others and so many of greater significance. But I do want to think about how we walk to that place, and think about what kind of protections that we can put in place to make everybody feel comfortable. So with that, I say thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And maybe Mr. Stafford, you could have a conversation to see where the latest status is. My last understanding of that last part. And Councilwoman, I think this is the challenge. Checking vaccination status. The challenge is you have 2 competing pieces. Any public meeting we have, you have to allow anyone from the public who wishes to come speak. and we could have people coming who are unvaccinated. Certainly, we can all see, we've seen other places, people who may want to show up unmasked, and other pieces, they have a right to speak at public meetings. But also, we have safeguards in place to keep meetings safe. I think those are the two competing things that are a little bit of a holdup. But Mr. Stafford, I won't put you on the spot to figure them all out, lay them all out now. But if you could connect in with the councilwoman, if there's a way to get us into a safe place, great. We'd all love to hear it. If there are some challenges that remain, please be sure you guys are discussing that as well.
I certainly will. I think to add to what you've said, Mayor, is the requirement for appropriate social distancing, which our council chambers just simply doesn't allow for enough people to be in the room physically present with the required social distancing. But I will certainly have the discussion promptly.
Thank you. Moving to Councilwoman Schlegel.
Thank you, Mayor. I was really very sad and upset to hear about the bus accident that happened with one of our school buses in our schools on the corner of Wildwood and Park Street. It was very scary, upsetting time for the students and the bus driver, and I'm sure for the car that was involved as well. I'm grateful that there were no serious injuries, and I'm sure it was very dramatic for the students to be involved in something like that. And I wish them and their families well as they go ahead with the rest of the school year. I know that there's some parents and neighbors that live in and around that area that have a petition going around to look into traffic and traffic issues and around that area. And I hope that we can support that petition when it comes to look into what can be done in that area. I believe that's the first and second ward. It's right on the cusp. So I'm sure, Mr. Herlock, we could work with the families there as well. On a happy note, I want to congratulate Marcia Marley and Jackie Morose on a very successful Montclair Literary Festival that concluded last weekend. It's incredible. Every year it gets better and better. I was able to go see little Stephen Van Zandt speak, and with Councilman Herlock was there behind me. I had a better seat than he did, but it was really a great night, and it's also a cultural treat for our town as well. The Literary Festival, which supports Succeed Together, which helps with lots of kids. I was able to get a sneak preview of the Claridge, and all I have to say is it's incredible. So if anyone could get there tomorrow night to see it, I strongly urge that you do. You will not recognize it from what we've known it to be for these past 20 years, 30 years that I've been going there. So it's going to be quite an asset to our town. It's just beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And I'll just note, I think it may have been different authors, because I brought the little guys over to listen to some of the authors at the Literary Festival, and it was great. But I didn't see you or the deputy mayor at those readings. I assume the books might have been slightly different. But in all seriousness, it was a great festival, and certainly something there for everyone, the whole family included, right? So great stuff. Going on to Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as you know, I'm a big fan of books that have mostly pictures as opposed to words. I've always been that way since school. And Councilwoman Schlegel, you did have a better seat than me. I couldn't afford the more expensive tickets to sit up closer. But it was a great presentation. It was great to see you there. The place was packed. He was hysterical, very informative as well. And to your other point, Councilwoman Schlegel, absolutely, we will work together on this. I've been putting quite a bit of time into it already. I've had several meetings with Lieutenant Ignazo about these issues, as well as have had Mr. Stafford and Mr. Scantlebury involved. And, they've been receiving the messages as I'm getting them. We're trying to figure out ways to address this. In addition, we're also, working with the schools, since a lot of the bus routes had been changed over the year from last year, different stops, different areas. So that's been a big issue, and I share obviously the concern that you've expressed as well. It was good to see you at the firefighters ball, in addition to Councilor Jacobellis. It was a great event. I know Mayor Spiller was there as well. I want to thank the men and women of our great fire department for their service. It was a great event to be there live and in person. Also want to give a shout out to the Upper Montclair Business Association. They had a wonderful meet and greet event at the Upper Montclair Women's Club. Met a lot of new businesses that are opening, particularly in Upper Montclair. I think it's a testament to the resiliency of the citizens, the people of Montclair, that with all the stuff that's going on, COVID, pandemic, what have you, we've been privileged to have many new businesses open as well. To that end, just attended the ribbon cutting at the Blonde Label. Look forward to many years of their services in Upper Montclair as well. Attended the Brookdale Park Arts and Crafts Fair last weekend, which was a great event. County does a wonderful job there with putting that event on. Participated in several meetings on the debriefs with the Jazz House Kids Festival that we just all experienced. A great event. First time closing down Broomfield Avenue. Had a lot of positive feedback on that as well. As Councilwoman Price Abrams indicated, I was privileged to be asked to participate on the panel regarding the school issue by the high school, CGI, the teachers, the students, putting on a nice presentation for October 28th at 7 p.m. I look forward to participating in that as well. And things, it's in Montclair, there's a lot of great things happening in our town, despite all the issues that we're having. And it really, again, is a testament to the resiliency of the people of Montclair. And I'm proud to be a part of these events going forward. And I look for many more things coming up. And I want to thank you all for the vote this evening on the rehabilitation for the Bellevue Theater property. That's coming along nicely. We hope to have that back running by the end of this year. I know the businesses are very excited as well. I met many of them at the Upper Montclair Business Association event at the Upper Montclair Women's Club. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Let's see. Okay, great. I think that's, I always got to do my math there. I went through all the different wards and the at-larges. So just wanted a big thank you to everybody. Certainly, I think that is the wonderful piece about Montclair. Certainly also, as you noted, a few of you noted, joining our firefighters at the ball was exciting to be at the place where we could do some things in person. Again, kudos to everybody following along with as many safety measures. Has been tough for all of us to get through here to get to that place. But certainly, important to recognize and honor and thank them for their work over a career for many, and certainly for all of them for the work that they do daily. So, I think very important. Certainly, when we talk about whether it be the literary festival, options there for everybody to attend and certainly have a good time. And I think the celebrations, which are Diwali about education as well as it is about celebrating and having fun, I think those are opportunities for us as a community to grow and really, as we move along that journey and still fight for justice and work around advocacy. These are important that as we bring families and others, we're having fun, but we are, serving an educational purpose throughout the community. And that I think is really a part of what's so special here in town. Certainly happy on that front. And of course, we're special nationally. I certainly am probably still a little giddy from it. Really excited to be able to meet our Vice President of the United States when she came into New Jersey. That was certainly an experience for sure. Vice President Harris was it was great to chat with her. Of course, I'm sure someone told her a little something, but she certainly was personable and knew some pieces about me and a great conversation. Want to thank her here for hearing my concerns that I addressed in terms of the infrastructure funding and other pieces that we need here, and our focus on early education and the funding that's needed as part of supporting our communities and specifically our community. So hopefully they're able to get that done in Washington with the help of her leadership as well. So exciting stuff on that front, and pleased that she took the time to come right here to New Jersey, and certainly also to to Montclair to have some of those discussions and highlight some of those pieces on her agenda and the president's agenda. So really interesting pieces there. And certainly, lastly, note Councilman Schlager, as you noted with that bus accident, had the opportunity to talk to Superintendent Pons right after that happened. Certainly, we're all thankful that everyone, the students, were all okay, and certainly the other injuries that were looked at were things that people could be treated for, and all could have been much, much worse. And we're all really thankful, and thank you to I heard on here, Deputy Mayor, and you for looking into all of the safety in that area with our police and others. So important work as we focus on the things we have to do, and certainly have fun at some of the other things and events that are in town. I think all the things we like to highlight about what makes Montclair so special. To what the clerk said, lots of voting going on coming up here, and it's important that New Jersey has early voting at this point. Councilwoman Price Abrams noted right on your ballot, it specifically lists some of those locations that you can do early voting at. There are specific locations to do that. So please look at your ballot, and then of course check your voting location itself for day of voting to make sure you know where that specifically will be. With that, I want to thank all my colleagues for robust conversations, for looking to address the challenges and issues that come before us. Thank you everyone for your efforts, and appreciate the work that everyone's doing on all fronts. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there a second? Second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great night.
Abstain. I want to keep talking. Abstain.
You want to keep
Good
talking,
night,
Councilman
everybody.
Marcel? You can stay on.
Abstain. Good night.
All right, good night.
You're only 4 minutes tonight, Bob.